Okay, right. He was working on a movie script of Herman Melville's Moby Dick and a theater project based on three of the most macabre short stories in Someone Like You. The film work was short, intense, and unsatisfying. A first draft had already been written by Ray Bradbury, but the director John Huston was unhappy with it and asked Roald to inject something of the feeling and philosophy of Melville into the dialogue. Yet he did not take to Houston at all. Impressed neither by the director's showy eelskin jacket nor his way of dealing with people. Dahl summed him up as a queer guy and one whom he found difficult to read. I cannot tell whether H is really pleased with what I've done or not, he told Sheila St. Lawrence. I believe what he's actually doing is taking my ideas and my sentences and fiddling around with them himself. He tells you nothing of the final version and won't show it. Really a strange sort of egomaniac, and I feel he could gobble you up if you don't take care. He was really not far off the mark. The project ended with Houston refusing to pay Dahl for his work and crediting himself as Bradbury's co-writer. The experience reinforced all Dahl's suspicious attitudes toward movie types. Uh, for the next 2 years, his professional life would be consumed by his one and only stage play, The Honeys. Based on three of the short stories and Someone Like You, it seemed initially like a good idea. Many of these tales had already adapted well to television, and there seemed no reason why they should not work in theater as well. They got adapted into a very popular TV series called Tales of the Unexpected.
Oh,
Yeah, I never saw it, but I remember reading Someone Like You and being like, this should be an anthology TV series. And someone had said to me, it already is. Like,
okay.
okay.
All
Yeah.
right.
But the reality of the show's production would be fraught with pitfalls and problems. In August 1954, he wrote to Sheila summarizing the plot. It was a typical mixture of the macabre, the moral, and the comic. The general idea is to follow a woman in 3 acts through 3 marriages with 3 different men. In each case, the husband is murdered because he deserves it. The woman is not really the murdering sort, but is driven to it by intolerable provocation. The fact that she kills them off instead of divorcing them should not obscure the principal moral of the play, which is that a bad husband deserves all that he gets. Many women in the world would gladly murder their husbands if they thought
Don't
they
like
would get
this.
away with it, and
Not
vice
a fan.
versa.
Don't like it. Don't like any of this. Not a fan.
But they are afraid. Maybe he was sensing something from Pat. Unfortunately, when he returned to New York in the autumn of 1954, the Honeys turned out to be a horrible experience for everyone involved. Roald quarreled with Cheryl Crawford and Carmel Myers, the American producers. He was unhappy with the casting, particularly Jessica Tandy in the lead role, and he fought constantly with the director, Frank Corsaro. And when his farce comedy opened on Broadway in the spring of 1955, it was panned and closed early. Yet the project refused to die. Despite the failure in New York, a British producer, Emile Littler, picked the play up and persuaded Roald to rewrite some of it for a UK production. So more than a year after its New York debacle, under the new title "Your Loving Wife," Roald had to go through the through the humiliation of failure all over again. The year 1956 was an inauspicious time to be premiering a tightly constructed, essentially artificial piece of drama. London had just witnessed the premiere of John Osborne's Look Back in Anger, which had been hailed as the beginning of the new wave of British theatre. Gritty realism was all the rage, even in the provinces. Dahl's clever escapist satire failed to synchronize with the popular critical pulse. Roald was quick to pin the blame for its lack of success on the others. The first night was very bad indeed, he told Sheila St. Lawrence after the opening in Oxford. I don't think there was anything much wrong with the play, but their acting was simply atrocious. No style, no speed, no fun. In addition, our male actor is, I'm afraid, no good at all. The whole thing is a bit of a bloody bore, isn't it?
Uh, how it's as a playwright, like if you have a play on Broadway, I mean, number one, obviously that's a major goal, right? And his first
Mhm.
play gets on Broadway, and then it fails.
Yeah.
If you have a play fail on Broadway now, no UK producer is gonna say, few rewrites. We'll try it over here. You
Maybe they just thought that like the Americans didn't understand its sensibilities
it's
or something. I don't
something.
know.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I have no idea. I mean, it was just a different time. I mean, but it probably had a lot to do with like his status and
Hmm.
his connections and his where he's at, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So, wow. Sheesh. So he gives up the theater after this, I hope.
Yeah, I believe so.
Mm,
There might have been some a little later down the track, but
sure, sure, sure.
it wasn't a big thing theater
Okay.
in his life. Yeah,
That's a good choice.
good choice. Good
Good
choices.
choice. Yeah.
Um, Dahl returned to New York in October 1956 with his 18-month-old daughter Olivia, but without Pat, who had gone to star in an Elia Kazan film. Olivia, 20, had been born the year before, named for her mother's favorite Shakespeare heroine, her birthday on April the 20th, and the $20 bill Roald had in his pocket when he arrived at the hospital. To Pat's fury, he hadn't even been present at the birth, stuck instead on a tour with the Honeys in Boston. That summer, they crossed to England. In Great Missenden, Pat found motherhood overwhelming. The most wonderful aunt, but the most lousy mother, her niece recalled. She believed baby Olivia was at war with her, screaming whenever she drawn near. In despair, she handed the child to Rold's sister Elsie, who returned her weeks later, quite transformed. Rold, by contrast, was a very maternal daddy, content to shoulder childcare even when it left him little time to write. So he's enjoying fatherhood for now. Um,
For now.
In Buckinghamshire, Dahl was blissfully happy in his new hut. So he had a writing hut built out the back
Gotta
of the
have
house where he
gotta
would
have a riding hut. Gotta have a riding hut.
writing hut where he would retire
We need
for the
more. We
day
need more. We
to
need
write.
more huts. We need more huts in the world. We've abandoned the hut.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he did love the hut.
Mhm.
Big fan of the hut.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, he was blissfully happy in his new hut. But Pat, now pregnant again, vanished for 20 weeks to film A Face in the Crowd. Dahl grumbled to his sister Claudia. Uh, Claudia? That can't be right. He didn't have a sister called Claudia. Okay. Dahl grumbled to his sister, a career and motherhood do not go together. Who wants the money? Who wants the money? I wish I could feed her some magic pills to get rid of her fierce ambition. Yet he admitted it would have been madness to stop her. A Kazan film was her dream. He longed to settle permanently in the English countryside and leave behind their New York life. For the next 5 years, they commuted between Great Missenden and Manhattan with spells in Los Angeles. In New York, they moved into a larger apartment near the Met. Pat worked stage, television, and film around two more pregnancies. Um, Chantal Sophia, renamed Tessa after Roald belatedly noticed her name rhymed with Dahl. Chantal Dahl. So renamed Tessa.
Can't
And
have that.
Theo, can't have that. And Theo, born in 1960. So they've got Olivia, Tessa, and Theo. Pat's career soared. A Face in the Crowd was a triumph, and Rold's at the time was stalling. The Honeys dragged on, rejections piled up at the New Yorker, and he grew increasingly dependent on Pat's earnings. I'm not rich enough to turn Playboy down, he snapped to his publisher Alfred Knopf when Sheila St. Lawrence began placing stories there. So his publisher wasn't happy with him having short stories in in Playboy. But
It's a
yeah,
fine magazine.
his
It's a fine
it's great articles I've
publication.
heard.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, yeah,
yeah.
sure.
Um, Hitchcock's TV adaptations of his tales became his main source of income. So, another friend of the pod, Alfred Hitchcock. Uh, the short stories grew darker and slower to write. Kiss Kiss took 6 years to compile. That's another compilation of his short stories. Knopf recoiled from one story, William and Mary, about a brain and an eye kept alive in a bowl, conf confessing it made him almost physically ill. He begged Dahl to return to the elegance of someone like you, warning readers would feel a bit let down. Grumpy and discouraged, Dahl began to wonder if his career as a short story writer was ending. Once again, Sheila urged him to try children's books instead. On a holiday in Norway in 1959, the seed of James and the Giant Peach began to sprout. By the following, I had told you it would get worse. He
I can
he he has
almost
he has started writing the children's books, but
I
yeah,
can almost smell the chocolate factory.
yeah. Seeds, peach seeds are sprouting at this point.
Yeah, good,
But
good.
by the following spring, he was deep into revisions. It was the story of James Henry Trotter, a lonely orphan boy who escapes his abusive aunts by climbing inside a giant magical peach. With a bunch of magically enlarged, friendly insect companions, he sails across the ocean to New York City, facing various challenges and learning the true meaning of freedom and friendship along the way. Pat and Sheila responded with delight. Sheila told him, really, honestly, truly, it is unbelievably better than ever. You've crossed the border between adult and juvenile. Kiss Kiss was finally published in 1960, defying Knopf's fears to storm the New York Times bestseller list. On the boat back to England, Dahl was astonished to see fellow passengers, including C.S. Forrester, the man who had first urged him to write 2 decades earlier, reading it. That's a nice, like, full circle moment. Like the dude that got you writing in the first place just happens to be on a boat. So that answers your question that sometimes they did take a boat.
Sometimes they did
Yeah,
take a boat. Yeah, right.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I would love to take a boat from New York to Liverpool
It would be
or
cool,
something
wouldn't
like
it?
that. Wouldn't that be
Yeah,
fun? Yeah,
yeah,
that'd be really cool.
yeah.
And then, yeah.
Avoiding icebergs and such, but yeah.
I think that technology has improved. I think that they're pretty good at avoiding the icebergs now. Can you imagine if like a cruise ship, yeah, crashed into an iceberg now and just everybody plunge? It would be
Yeah.
amazing. That would be so cool.
They like see the iceberg coming and they're like, oh, I know how this goes.
The captain, you just have this like suicidal captain, just like fuck it. We're just
Yeah.
he flips the switch off on the computer. He spins the wheel. Just
Yeah.
like I'm so sick of these fucking cruises. Just head right to the iceberg.
Oh
So
God.
funny.
Um, okay. So we're taking boats. We're taking
Yeah,
boats.
yeah,
Surviving the boats. Okay.
yeah.
At Gypsy House in Great Missenden, this is what they have named their house, by the way. The Dahl had grown closer to Pat and the children, enjoying fatherhood, working in his beloved riding hut, and with new allies in London and Sheila steady in New York. At last, he seemed to have found his rhythm, but the storm clouds were gathering. Theo Matthew Roald, Theo Matthew Roald Dahl was born on the 30th of July, 1960, the first boy in the Dahl household. Roald wrote gleefully to Sheila, he has a pair of testicles the size of walnuts and a sharp, wicked penis. Days later, he added that Theo's
Hell
circumcised
yeah,
tool, now healed.
dudes rock. Dudes rock. Sheesh.
He added that Theo's circumcised tool, now healed, glows with promise, like the small unopened bud of some exotic flower. This is you got to be making your agent a lot of money for them to be on the receiving end of this.
You should write children's books. Jeez. Sheesh.
Okay. Uh, on October the 1st, they boarded a ghastly Boeing jet to spend another winter in New York. Roald's love affair with Manhattan was becoming ever more jaundiced. He now viewed it as a violent place filled with threats and danger. The cab drivers gave him the willies, and they were the enemies of the people. One day, from his window, he watched a tall boy with a tense white face running through traffic. Roald identified with the youth. It seemed he was a kind of prophet, warning him that catastrophe was around the corner. Like the child in his short story, The Wish, which we mentioned earlier, terrified of stepping on the cracks in the pavement or treading on the wrong color in the carpet. Roald had a premonition of disaster. He had seen the omens, and he confessed to himself, "We crack dodgers always take notice of omens." He had tried to dodge life's dangerous cracks and failed. Soon, this instinct that New York was no place to raise a young family would seem truly prophetic. On December the 5th, 1960, the pram carrying Roald's sleeping 4-month-old baby Theo was hit by a cab on the corner of a New York street and crushed against the side of a bus. Susan
Oh.
Denson.
Did the baby survive?
uh, yeah, I mean, we're getting to that.
Okay, okay, okay. Go
Okay.
on, go on, go on.
Susan Denson had this is the nanny, had just collected Tessa from nursery and was bringing her home for lunch. She was pushing Theo in the pram and trying to manage Stormy, one of Ivor Bruce's dogs. Don't know, Ivor Bryce's dogs at the same time. So she's got the kid and the pram and the dog. It was her third winter in New York with the Dahls, and she fitted so well into their family that they made her one of Theo's godparents. The weather was bitterly cold. They were walking down Madison Avenue when they reached 85th Street, waiting at the crossing for the light to change. When it did, Sue pushed Theo's pram off the sidewalk and out into the road. At that point, a cab careened around the corner and crashed into it. The driver panicked. Instead of braking, he stepped on the accelerator, ripping the pram out of the nanny's hands and propelling it 40 feet through the air before it smashed into the side of a parked bus. Theo's head took the full force of the impact, and his skull shattered. Both Roald and Pat were within earshot of the accident, but neither saw it. Roald was in Clifford Odette's apartment writing. Pat, who had only recently finished shooting Breakfast at Tiffany's, was in a local shop. She heard the police sirens but did not initially realize her own son had been injured. An ambulance rushed the tiny child to the nearby Lenox Hill Hospital along with Susan, Tessa, and the dog. There, Marian Goodman's physician husband, Ed, recalled Theo was diagnosed with a terrific neurological deficit. Almost everyone thought he was going to die. When Roald and Pat arrived in the emergency room, they faced a dreadful situation. Not only was their tiny child horribly injured, but the doctors were disagreeing publicly about what should be done. These are Roald Dahl's notes from the time. Okay, right. A note on Theo's accident. I was working on the 7th floor. My phone turned off. I did not get the incoming call from Susan, but I heard a police siren. Then Pat was in the apartment calling to me. We went out, got a cab, drove to Lenox Hill Hospital emergency. Cab driver didn't know entrance, dropped us a block away. Theo was in examination room with 2 doctors. Susan, Tessa, and Stormy were in a small waiting room with policemen who drove squad car and policemen in charge of school crossing. Things looked grim. They were giving plasma to Theo. Pat called Dr. Zipser. He arrived quickly. They admitted Theo upstairs to pediatric section in charge of the senior pediatrician, Dr. O'Regan. They called in Dr. Eshlin, senior orthopedic surgeon, who interrupted an operation to come down and look at Theo. He was in a state of deep shock, colorless, high pulse, temperature around 102 degrees. They didn't dare move him for x-ray. I suggested portable x-ray. They did this. Also arranged round-the-clock special nurses. But this was general pediatric ward and none of the nurses nor the floor doctors were trained in neurosurgery. It is about 3 p.m. now. We called Ed Goodman and Bill Watson for advice. They both examined baby, Ed going in with Dr. Eshlin. Multiple skull fractures were revealed by x-ray, but there were no other signs of bodily injury. Around 8 p.m., Theo began coming out of shock, color in cheeks, temp down a little. Bill Watson called and suggested we call in Dr. Milton Singer as a consultant. I checked with O'Regan, who grudgingly acquiesced. Called Milton at home 9:10 p.m. He came at once. There now ensued a 1 hour argument around bedside between Doctors O'Regan, Eshland, Singer, and Watson. Singer said it was essential to do a subdural tap immediately to relieve the pressure on the brain. Doctors Eshland and O'Regan said no, it was too early to tamper. Singer refused to budge. In the end, they did the tap, drew off 10 and 8 cc of fluid and blood. O'Regan came bustling out, said to me, I do not approve of this, and I did not know what the consequences will be. Eshland said the same. I said, why did you allow it then? They said, because Singer was so insistent. I stayed in all night in hospital watching the baby. At 1 a.m., his temperature went down to 101. At 2 a.m., it went to 99 and stayed there. He was still having blood and intravenous feeding. His blood count was low, indicating a big loss of blood somewhere. He was also in an oxygen tent. I had a row of nurses about fixing a catheter tube. First, she strapped it to his kicking leg. Then she strapped it upwards to the side of his cot. I said, lay it on the mattress. Eventually, she did. Next morning, O'Regan came in and called me aside, saying he couldn't have outside men like Dr. Goodman and Watson interfering and examining baby. He was very unpleasant about it, and I said I would tell them. I did. Theo improved slightly through day. They x-rayed him, found no fracture of cervical spine. I requested O'Regan to make no decisions without Singer's agreement. Eshland said, I'm not going to ask Singer's permission for what I do. I said, you must all work together. This was Tuesday. I stayed most of the day, so did Pat. The doctors came and went. I stayed Tuesday night watching the insufficient antics of the nurses, trying to advise them as best I could. Wednesday morning, Singer came in. Theo had 2 seizures in the afternoon. Singer provided half a cc of Dilantin as sedative. Checked with Ashlyn. I watched the nurse give it by dropper. She had half a small cardboard cup of the stuff. I protested, made her check and recheck the order book. She said it was correct. She should not have given it. Only hospital nurse may dispense medicines. 10 minutes later, Anne Bancroft and Harvey are there. O'Regan enters. The nurse checks dosage. O'Regan says she's given half an ounce instead of half a cc. He immediately aspirates it out with a tube. This is 15 times overdose. He then rushes out and proceeds to blame Dr. Singer to me. I call in Pat to hear it. We protest. It would not have happened had I written the order, he says. Why not, we say. This was the nurse's error. His general attitude is too much to stand. I call Singer. He arranges for an immediate removal of baby to neurological wing of Presbyterian Hospital. Bill Watson rushes round to help. O'Regan finally, 1 hour, turns up, has to give release, which I sign. Bill has blanket to carry baby. O'Regan says, hey, wait, who are you? And then delays still further by doing a complete medical examination of Theo in front of 2 other doctors. Eshland comes in. He behaves well. I explain to him the reasons for move. Bill Watson carries Theo out into his arms. Harvey is waiting in Bill's car. Bill and Theo, Pat and I get in. Harvey drives to Presbyterian. There, Doctors Singer and Ranishoff are waiting, and efficiency reigns. This is Wednesday evening, 9 p.m. Housed in an oxygen tent for 2 weeks.
There's nothing like medical error.
Yeah.
We love a good medical error. Holy shit.
Housed in an oxygen tent for 2 weeks, Theo underwent several operations to drain fluid from his head. The surgery was successful, and the doctors became increasingly confident that he would pull through, but no one was sure how badly his brain had been damaged. As there was no serious internal injuries and his head wounds seemed to be healing, Theo came back home to convalesce just before Christmas. Then a week later, something about his condition began to disturb his parents. He went quiet. He no longer smiled. His reactions seemed dull. Pat and Roald spent New Year's Eve with their neighbor, the psychiatrist Sonia Austrian, and her husband Jeffrey. It was them who realized what had happened. Cerebrospinal fluid had built up in Theo's cranial cavity and was pressing on his brain, causing him to go blind. Roald rushed the baby back to hospital. Ed Goodman recalled that when he examined him, his head felt like a bag of marbles. The pressure of the buildup of the fluid around the brain, he told Dahl, carried with it a severe risk not only of permanent blindness, but also of retardation and even death. The doctors immediately extracted the liquid and fitted a tube to drain any further fluid directly into his heart, where it could easily be reabsorbed. Initially, they were doubtful that the child's sight would return, but it did. And eventually, Theo was declared fit enough to go back home on January the 14th, 1961. No sooner had he got home than his sight began to deteriorate again. The shunt, the internal drainage tube into his heart, had blocked. Once more, the surgeons operated and cleared the blockage. Once more, Theo's sight returned, though very much impaired. It was a pattern that would repeat itself. Each time, Roald and Pat hoped that Theo's body would start absorbing this cerebrospinal fluid naturally and that the implanted tube would become redundant. Each time, their hopes were to be dashed. Theo would come home, appear to be doing fine, then he would lose his sight because the tube had blocked. So began a terrible cycle: surgery, fragile recovery, then relapse as the valve clogged. 6 times in 9 months, Theo's sight disappeared, each episode risking blindness, brain damage, and even death. At one point, the tube was rerouted into the membrane around his lung, an
Oh,
agonizingly invasive procedure, but this too failed.
oh, oh. This might be the darkest episode that we there's there was Ananias Nin was pretty dark with the incest and everything, but this is
Oh,
wild. What a life. Oh. Can we get to the giant peach?
not yet, Kevin.
Can we get to the chocolate factory? Oh man. Oh. And
um,
again, I was looking forward to today, and I was like, this is going to be such a relief from the school shootings and the assassinations and the just the darkness of life. And here we are.
here we are.
Yeah, this is what I get for sort of again, Heart of Darkness.
Out of
What a
darkness.
story! That poor baby,
Yeah.
and that poor family. It's literal torture, just emotional
Mm.
torture and mental torture and uh anyway, keep going.
Something good does come out of the situation.
Oh,
Uh, Dahl was not a man to sit by. He immersed himself
ah,
in the technical problem, writing to his mother, "The valve is literally nothing but a slit in the plastic tube. Do they have anything better in England? Something less likely to block and clog?" Through family contacts, he consulted neurosurgeon Wiley McKissock, but his alternatives also failed. With typical resourcefulness, he contacted a man whom he had first corresponded with whom he had first corresponded in 1950, when he wanted to buy a miniature steam engine as a present for his nephew Nicholas. Stanley Wade was no ordinary toy maker. He was a craftsman, a self-effacing perfectionist. His specialty was making model airplane engines, and in particular the tiny hydraulic pumps that supplied his little aircraft with fuel. These never blocked. When Roald explained his son's problem, he asked Wade if he could build something to the specifications Theo required. Wade told him he thought he could. By this time, too, Dahl had found a kindred spirit in one of McKissock's proteges, a pioneering pediatric neurosurgeon called Kenneth Till, who was the consultant at London's premier hospital for sick children in Great Ormond Street, and would now become Theo's consultant. Till listened with patience to Rold's proposal to design a new valve, and then invited Dahl and Stanley Wade to come and watch him operate so that they could see exactly what was required. Till was impressed by Dahl's knowledge, his grasp of the issues, his tenacity, and his psychological detachment. He had this coolness, he recalled. I think this perhaps is the word. The coolness to want to know the pros and cons, the whys and the wherefores. The crisis worsened in October 1961 when Theo's lung collapsed, and he endured 9 terrible days of pain before another old-style valve was fitted. Once again, the small pale baby with indomitable spirit, swathed in bandages and surrounded by tubes and drips, pulled through. October 1961, Theo nearly died again. He was rushed to hospital in London, suffering from a collapsed lung, and immediately had a double operation to remove the tube and drain the lung. 9 terrible days followed, with Theo constantly in pain, crying, vomiting, and thrashing in his cot as the new doctors hoped against hope and that perhaps this time he would recover without the need of the drainage shunt and an eighth craniotomy. But it was not to be. His head began to swell once more, and so a new tube was fitted, still with the old style valve because the dull Wade Till version was not ready yet. His recovery was by no means certain, yet like, there's a little bit of repetition. Um, by January 1962, he was back home with his state of health kept, though his state of health kept Roald and Pat on the jump constantly. Within a year, the Dahl Wade till valve was ready. No more than 2 centimeters long, with six tiny moving steel parts inside of it. Till fitted it for the first time on a 1-year-old child in May 1962, and it worked perfectly. As he reported in The Lancet, the invention was characterized by low resistant, ease of sterilization, no reflux, robust construction, and negligible risk of blockage. It was a massive improvement on what existed previously and had been realized almost entirely by Dahl's practical initiative and his refusal to accept the status quo. The DWT valve proved a huge advance in treating similar conditions, and because Dahl, Wade and Till had agreed not to make any money from their invention, it cost less than a third of its more inferior predecessors. Before it was eventually superseded, the valve was used successfully on almost 3,000 children around the world. Some people may even still have one in their heads today.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a story. That is great.
Yes.
You can invent things. You could just do things. You really can. Yeah. You can just
Yeah.
make a
So I
podcast. You
believe
can just yeah.
yeah. I believe Theo didn't end up with one because they eventually did a final surgery where he didn't need it anymore. His
Uh-huh.
lungs and
Okay.
his brain were just
Okay.
draining by
Sure,
themselves.
sure,
So
sure.
so he
Okay.
didn't end up with one of these valves, but it
But
did
it
help
okay.
thousands of other children. Yeah.
What yeah. Why not? But I did
And to
rolled
answer
off.
your question, Theo
Yeah.
survived.
Good. And did he thrive, or did he, was there blindness, or I mean,
No, yeah, no, he was fine. He didn't have
wow.
blindness. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, he's still
What
alive
a,
today.
uh, okay. Well, hello, Theo. God bless you. I'm glad you survived. Uh, the pram flying 40 feet through the air and
Yeah.
crashing into a bus. Holy
Yeah, that's
shit.
crazy.
What a story. That alone, that's like a whole episode. Like if we were an NPR podcast,
Hmm.
this is NPR. That would be a whole episode of one of their shows. That's crazy. Okay.
Okay.
Well, okay. You
Uh,
can just do things. Remember, people, friends, you can just do things. Nobody's
um,
stopping you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Don't relax. Uh, amid the ordeal, Dahl built himself a sanctuary, his little brick hut in the garden at Great Missenden, insulated with polystyrene. The front room housed files, ladders, and model planes. The back was his writing den. There, in his mother's old chair, legs propped and blanket tucked around him, he shut out the world for 4 hours each day. It was here in this refuge forged from trauma that his imagination truly took flight. In November 1961, Roald flew to New York for the publication of James and the Giant Peach. The reviews were glowing. The Herald Tribune called it a richly imaginative fantasy, extremely well told and convincingly illustrated. We love it. The New York Times praised its magic brew concocted from absurdly nauseating ingredients with with never a dull moment, predicting it would be received with rapturous attention. Sales, however, were modest, though Knopf's children's department reassured him that this is how even their bestsellers began. Back in England, he trudged through a bitter winter, hacking a 100-foot path through the orchard just to reach his hut, where he began revising a new children's book, Charlie Chocolate Boy. At home, the family, though battered by Theo's ordeal, had grown stronger. Pat admitted she no longer wanted to have Pat admitted she no longer wanted to have nice fights and make it up in bed. realizing that constant quarrels eroded Roald's trust. After an argument, she said, "He simply didn't like me for days and days." Theo's survival had become a centering force. His walking was improving, and his quick mind suggested that the accident had left surprisingly little damage. Roald doted on the children. He bought Olivia a glass cabinet for her treasures and sometimes joined in her games, chasing fire engines through the countryside, launching tiny fire balloons, or spinning tales about the witch's tree at the garden's edge. One morning, he astonished the girls by making their names appear in the lawn, the work of fairies, he insisted, though it was really weed killer sprinkled at midnight. Each child had their own character. 7-year-old Olivia, beautiful and willowy, translucent and glowing, shared her father's love of making things and could sit for hours in the birdhouse watching quietly. Roald delighted in her curiosity and kindness, calling her present an enchantment. Tessa, by contrast, was a little tiger, fiery and determined, and Theo, still a mystery, was simply alive, which to Roald was enough. By 1962, life was finally finding its rhythm. Pat was away for 11 weeks filming HUD, but Roald was content writing, gardening, walking the children to school, and continuing work on Charlie Chocolate Boy, while even beginning another news story. In November 1962, Olivia brought home a note from school. There was an outbreak of measles. Pat and Roald worried most about Theo, still so fragile. Dahl knew that globulin could be used to boost children's immunity against the disease, and that, although uncommon in England, in America it was a fairly routine prophylactic. Pat called her brother-in-law, Ashley Miles, to see if he could help. Miles agreed to send some, but he only provided enough for Theo. Let the girls get measles, he told her. It'll be good for them. 3 days later, Olivia was covered in spots. At first, the illness seemed mild. Her fever dropped, and she was well enough to learn chess from her father and to beat him straight away. But the next morning, she was strangely lethargic. Her hands fumbled, her head hurt, and all she wanted to do was sleep. The family doctor found nothing alarming, but within hours she was convulsing, her eyes dead-looking, her mouth gaping limply, oozing spit. Pat ran to the switch that connected the hut to the main house and hit it desperately. 4 quick flashes brought Roald running. Immediately, he called Dr. Brigstoke. While they waited for him to arrive, Pat and Roald cooled Olivia's forehead with cold flannels, but she did not respond. Soon she was unconscious. As soon as Brigstock saw her, he summoned an ambulance. Olivia's breathing was now shallow and irregular, and she needed oxygen. Roald wrapped his limp daughter in an eiderdown and carried her out to the ambulance, which rushed her away to the nearby Stoke Mandeville Hospital. There, they hoped she could be resuscitated. Pat stayed behind with the other children. Brigstock went with Olivia in the ambulance. Roald followed behind in his car. There, Dahl recorded the events in the cool clinical notes later found in his hut, written in a green exercise book simply labeled Olivia. I really don't want to read this out. Okay. Awful drive. Lorries kept holding us up on narrow roads. Got to hospital. Ambulance went to wrong entrance. Backed out. Arrived. Young doctor in charge. Maroon, and he gave her 5 milligrams sodium atomol. I sat in the hall, smoked, felt frozen. A small single-bar electric fire on the wall. An old man in the next room. A woman doctor went to the phone. She was trying urgently to locate another doctor. He arrived. I went in. Olivia lying quietly, still unconscious. She has an even chance, doctor said. They had tapped her spine, not meningitis. It's encephalitis. Mervyn left in my car. I stayed. Pat arrived with Elsie and John. John went out to get some whiskey. Pat went in to see Olivia, kissed her, spoke to her. Still unconscious. I went in. I said, Olivia, Olivia. She raised her head slightly off pillow. Sister said, don't. I went out. We drank whiskey. I told doctor to consult experts, call anyone. He called a man in Oxford. I listened. Instructions were given. Not much could be done. I first said I would stay on. Then I said I'd go back with Pat and Elsie and John. Went. Arrived home. Called Philip. He called the hospital. Called me back. Shall I come? Yes, please. I said I'd tell hospital he was coming. I called. Doc thought I was Evans. He said, I'm afraid she's worse. I got in the car, got to hospital, walked in. 2 doctors advanced on me from the waiting room. How is she? I'm afraid it's too late. I went into her room. She was over her. Doctor said to nurse, go out, leave him alone. I kissed her. She was warm. I went out. She is warm, I said to doctors in hall. Why is she so warm? Of course, he said. I left.
Abby, you're gonna get through it. I don't blame you. This is one of the most brutal episodes that we've done. You're gonna make it. I had no idea. Of course, and of course, this would happen to him.
At the same age that his daughter, his sister,
His
died.
sister. I mean, yeah. I mean, his life. I mean, it's just like, this episode is just a reminder that like life is fragile, but it's also like you can be in control of it, but then you can be things can just happen to you too, right? Like, so you're gonna make it.
Okay.
You got it. You got it.
With Olivia, there was nothing he could do to affect the outcome. She was gone, and he could not bring her back. Her death left him limp with despair, and fast behind the sense of loss was a feeling of guilt that he'd somehow let his favorite child down. Pat was waiting for him when he returned home. She already knew the worst. The doctors at the hospital had called her to break the news. Roald hugged her desperately, his heavy sobs spilling onto her shoulder. The pediatrician, Dr. Evans, who arrived at the hospital after Olivia died, came early the next morning to Gypsy House and told them that she'd been the victim of measles encephalitis, a rare inflammation of the brain that can arise from measles and which affects 1 in 1,000 cases. He confirmed that large doses of gamma globulin could have prevented her from getting the disease. Thus, Pat remembered, began the landslide of anger and frustration that almost buried the family. The children were resilient. Theo was too young to understand what was happening, while 5-year-old Tessa simply responded to the news by asking her mother if all of Olivia's miniatures were now hers. This upset Pat, but it was exactly what Tessa's aunt Elfhild had done when her elder sister died 4 decades earlier. Only later would the effects of her elder sister's death on her own psychology become clear to Tessa, to such an extent that even now, she finds her mind has blanked many memories of Olivia. Pat found surprising consolation from Mormor. Her Norwegian mysticism and crystal vision offered a sense that death was not the absolute end. Moreover, Pat knew that her 77-year-old mother-in-law had suffered in 1920 exactly as she was suffering now. The parallels between the death of Astrid and Olivia were indeed uncanny. Each had been the eldest child, each the apple of their father's eye, each 7 years old when a medical emergency abruptly ended their young lives. Pat could cry and talk about Olivia. Roald could not. He locked her toys away in an oak chest, drank more heavily, and increased his painkillers. To Tessa and Theo, he became distant, almost lost. He did not want to talk about Olivia. He would not let anything come out. Nothing, Pat would say later. Depression, which Dahl called a great self-indulgence, overwhelmed him. That winter was so cold, the ink froze in his hut. He tried to puzzle out why measles had turned fatal, lobbied doctors to protect other children, but there was nothing he could fix. The family turned outward for meaning. They put Olivia's trust fund into international help for children with Roald as the chairman of the local branch. It was the first time he threw himself into public campaigning. Eventually, Dahl's spirits improved sufficiently for him to return to the alternative reality he had started to create almost 3 years earlier. Just before Olivia's death, he had retitled his latest story, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and had greatly fleshed out the central character, Willy Wonka, the superhuman genius with an ability to create the most outlandish and exciting sweets the world had ever seen. This extravagant magician, whose name Dahl had refashioned from a boomerang called the Skilly Wonka his half-brother Louis once made for him, possessed a personality that was much like his creator's. He was capricious, entertaining, and brilliant. He was an adult, but one with the sensibilities of a child. He was devoid of sentimentality. He was funny, he was private, he was elusive. He had a dark side. Bad children would get mashed, stretched, transformed into giant blueberries, or boiled into fudge if they had stepped out of line in his inventing rooms. On the surface, he could seem aloof, but underneath, he had a kind heart. It was perhaps the most memorable character Dahl would ever create, a man who lived by his own rules, within his own realm, apparently safe from the world outside his factory walls. When Roald finally closed the door to the hut, pulled the curtains tight, sat in his chair, wrapped a sleeping bag around his legs, and switched on his lamp, he too found himself in a world which he controlled completely and where no unpleasant surprises could disturb him. It was also reassuring that this imaginary universe was focused on one of his most favorite things, chocolate. Ever since he was a boy, Roald had been fascinated by sweets and particularly by chocolate. Beyond boyhood ecstasies among the licorice bootlaces and multicolored gobstoppers that lined the walls of Mrs. Pratchett's sweet shop in Llandliff, he had honed a palate for chocolate tasting at Repton, where his housemaster had arranged with the marketing department of Cadbury's at Bourneville that each year every boy in the Priory would receive a cardboard box containing 12 bars of new Cadbury's chocolate. The box came with a checklist on which its recipient was invited to write comments and award marks. This passion continued into adulthood. One of his talismanic objects he kept beside him in his writing hut was a big silver ball made out of wrappers taken from the chocolate bars he had eaten for lunch every day when he was working at his office in Shell in London in the 1930s. Somewhere between a golf ball and a tennis ball in size, it was so unexpectedly heavy that when he brought it out and showed it to visitors, few could guess what it was. Most reckoned it was some sort of cannonball. The twin disasters of his children partially explain why the story went through 6 different rewrites. Much of the narrative remained constant throughout. The essential nature of the 2 main characters, for example, the capricious Willy Wonka and the impoverished, spirited, and kindly child, Charlie Bucket, never changed. In all versions of the story, Charlie wins one of the golden tickets for a trip around Wonka's extraordinary factory. His fellow winners, there were originally 10, likewise were always grotesque parodies of childish vices such as greed, selfishness, conceitedness, television addiction, or being spoiled, but their similarities end. At the beginning, there were no Oompa Loompa factory workers and no Grandpa Joe to look after Charlie, nor were any of the child grotesque present in their final form. Most strikingly, perhaps, in the early drafts, Dahl described Charlie as a small Negro boy who boldly confronts Wonka with the issue that innumerable parents and educators would ponder in future years. What actually happened to the children who were juiced, stretched, minced, flushed down a rubber chute, or cooked in a fudge boiler? Shocked that Charlie would think anyone might have been hurt in his domain, Wonka's reply is true to form in innocent naivety. I run a chocolate factory, you know, he tells the boy indignantly, not a butcher's shop. When
This
Pat
is fun.
returned home,
This all it all makes sense now. We're at the chocolate factory, but the chocolate factory is not it's not fun, you
yeah,
know. Yeah. And that film too is fucking wild. I mean, the
yeah,
one, yeah, I mean it's if you rewatch it, you go, this is dark
what is
and
happening?
strange. There's that weird psychedelic sequence in the middle of
Yeah.
it, and he's chanting, and the whole thing is intense. But it's iconic, of course. I mean, like
Mm.
oompa loompa. I mean, it's just like just so wild. Um, Holy moly! All right, well, we're at the chocolate factory.
We're at the chocolate factory.
We made it. We made it.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay.
Uh, when Pat returned home from shooting her latest movie, a thriller called Psyche 59, she began to sense a new buzz of anticipation around HUD. The New York Film Critics voted her Best Actress of 1963, as did the National Board of Review. A few weeks later, she was nominated for an Oscar, but because the ceremonies in Los Angeles were taking place in April 1964, when she would be 8 months pregnant, she decided not to attend. She also thought she was a rank outsider for the award. Then at 5 a.m. on April the 13th, the phone rang to inform her that she had won. Roald's former lover, Annabelle Power, had collected the statuette for her. It was a moment of triumph both for Pat and the family. Her talent had finally been acknowledged, and her own professional future now seemed to be secure. Not only did my whole industry think I was good enough, she wrote, but now finally a fabulous new career was just around the corner and we'd made a fortune. Ophelia Magdalene Dahl was born in May, her name perhaps consciously evoking Olivia's, and a few weeks later, the entire family decamped to spend the summer in Honolulu, where Pat was co-starring with John Wayne in a movie called Harm's Way, a wartime drama directed by Otto Preminger. Roald was not happy there. He disliked the gold tap style in which they were living. It brought out the Spartan in him. I really don't like this place, he told Mike Watkins, and I don't like living like the Aga Khan with a suite of 8 adjoining rooms, 4 bathrooms, 3 kitchens, all paid for, thank heavens, by old Preminger. He took consolation searching the island for orchids, then his current hobby to take back for an orchid house he was planning to create at Gypsy House. He was also befriended by a young and unknown movie director called Robert Altman, who tried to pressure him into writing a movie script. Roald was flattered by the attention and he liked the idea Altman proposed, but he was reluctant to get involved. His wartime experiences had left him suspicious of the genre, and watching Hitchcock shooting one of his short stories at the Royal Albert Hall in 1955, he had found tedious in the extreme. Now he'd only contemplated film and television work when he needed money. Curiously, he had just earned the biggest movie fee of his life from MGM, and he had done it without writing a sentence of dialogue. Earlier in 1964, Pat had shown him a script of a movie called 36 Hours, which she felt was very similar to Roald's own short story from 1944 called Beware of the Dog. The film indeed had a direct parallel to his tale of an RAF pilot who awakens from consciousness after bailing out of his plane to discover that the hospital he is in is not in England, as he has been told, but in occupied France, and that the doctors who speak perfect English and are looking after him are actually Germans bent on extracting information from him. He instructed his reluctant agent to do battle with MGM. The fight was a short one. This is Anne Watkins's son, Mike, who had taken over the agency, initially advised his client to settle for $12,500, but Dahl was confident in the strength of his position and wanted at least 25. We could hold up the whole picture if we wanted to, he argued, or let them make it and then sue. But the studio refused to increase their offer, so Dahl calmly increased his demand, explaining his resolve to the nervous Watkins in terms of his responsibilities to his family. As you know, I'm not personally greedy for money. This property is not mine now. It is in trust for Theo, who may well need funds throughout his life, especially if he becomes an epileptic. The chances of this are even. In the end, his tenacity paid off. MGM not only gave Dahl a credit as the originator of the story, but a payment of $30,000 made directly into his children's trust account. Winning. Roald returned to London prior to the publication of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. He had initially wanted the young Maurice Sendak, who had illustrated the Robert Graves children's story, The Big Green Book, to do the things. In the end, he was persuaded to choose the slightly more experienced Joseph Schneiderman. When the book was published in September 1964, it was an immediate success, provoking none of the controversy it would later cause when it was made into a movie. The New York Times Book Review declared on October 25th, 1964, that Roald Dahl, a writer of spine-chilling stories for adults, proved in James and the Giant Peach that he knew how to appeal to children. Now he has done it again gloriously. The reviewer praised his fertile invention, his rich humor, and his acute observational skill, declaring that Wonka was a Dickensian character that the tale itself had made a lovely book. It was selected as one of the New York Times Books of the Year. All over America, adults and children responded to the story with warmth and enthusiasm.
Hurrah! I'm so happy for him after all this hell that he's been through. Good job.
Yes.
Finally, we made it to the chocolate factory
Okay.
after all
Yeah.
that hell. Dead children, dead siblings, prams flying through the air, failure to conceive, the whole schmear. Does it get
Yeah,
worse again? I bet it does.
well, let's find out, shall
Let's
we?
find out.
After Christmas, the Dulls traveled to Los Angeles, a city Rolt had once dismissed as Gomorrah and destruction and the Lion's Den, where none of us is Daniel. Pat was set to star in John Ford's final film, Seven Women. Neither she nor Roald told anyone, not even Ford, that she was 3 months pregnant. On February 17th, 1965, the fourth day of filming, she spent hours riding a donkey for repeated takes. Exhausted, she was dropped home by her friend and co-star Mildred Dunnock. At 6 o'clock, Roald bought her a martini. As the children were being bathed upstairs, Pat joined them, wanting to wash Tessa herself. Then, as she sat on the lavatory seat, a searing pain tore through her head. "Mummy, what's wrong?" cried Tessa. The nanny helped her stagger into the bedroom where Roald, martini in hand, found her pressing her temple. "I've got the most awful pain right here," she said. She said she was seeing double, muttered bizarre fantasies and peculiar thoughts, then lost consciousness. Roald, suspecting a stroke, phoned Dr. Charles Carton, a neurosurgeon he had recently met to discuss the Dahl-Wade-Till valve. Within minutes, an ambulance arrived. Pat, briefly conscious, was covered in vomit and unable to recognize her children. Naked, Tessa stared in utter desolation, remembering Olivia's last night. She knew exactly what the sirens meant. It's an ambulance coming for Mummy. A spinal tap confirmed it. Blood filled the fluid. X-rays revealed 2 hemorrhages already, and during testing, she suffered a third, the most catastrophic. Carton warned Roald bluntly, if he refused surgery, she would die. If he agreed, she would likely survive, only with devastating disabilities. The operation began at midnight. For 7 hours, surgeons worked beneath a trap door cut into her skull, removing clots and clipping an aneurysm that had finally burst, a time bomb waiting for its moment. Roald stayed at the hospital through the night, phoning Mildred to comfort the children and calling Pat's mother with cautious words. If she lived 10 days, she might regain some function. Carton confided privately that Roald might one day regret her survival. Pat lay in a coma for almost 3 weeks, her body laced with tubes, lying on an ice mattress to reduce swelling. Roald sat by her endlessly. "Pat, this is Roald." Tessa says hello. Theo says hello. Don Minnie, Theo's nickname for Ophelia, says hello. He shouted, pleaded, filled the silence. Newspapers reported there was little hope. Variety even ran her obituary. Film actress Patricia Neal dies at 39. But on March 10th, almost 3 weeks after the collapse, she stirred. She could not move. She could not speak. She had no idea where she was, yet she was alive. Roald refused to see curses or fate in the catastrophe. "Superstition is something that one grows out of," he told journalist Barry Farrell. You find out later it doesn't make a bit of difference if you step on the cracks or not. The great thing is to keep going whatever happens. In the days after Pat's stroke, Roald was at the hospital from 6 each morning, home only to eat and to sleep. He juggled doctors, journalists circling for news of the Oscar-winning actress, and a flood of more than 100 letters a day. The crisis suited him. It demanded control, and he saw a chance for a miracle. Pat lay in a coma for 3 weeks, an immense vegetable on life support. Her brain damage was unknown, her appearance so shocking that her sister was told not to visit. When she began to stir, Roald decided the children should see her. 4-year-old Theo was distressed, and 7-year-old Tessa horrified. This hideous creature, with tubes coming out of every hole, no hair, a black eye patch, lipstick smeared all over a lopsided mouth, was her mother. At first, Pat barely recognized people, her right side paralyzed, her speech broken. Roald, ignoring the pessimism of doctors, clung to neurosurgeon Charles Carton's advice. Constant stimulation might help. He hired therapists immediately and imposed a regime of ruthless intensity. Sympathy was not part of it. Visitors were limited, flowers and cards removed. Very drastic action would have to be taken, he wrote. Within days, Pat's mobility improved. She began piecing together sentences. Astonishingly, a month after the stroke, she was discharged. With an eye patch, leg brace, and a scarf over her scars, she told the press, fully conscious, and her thought process thought processes are perfect. She's a tremendous fighter. But at home, progress was grueling. She struggled with colors, speech, feeding herself, all while pregnant. To get her to exercise was like pulling teeth, one nurse recalled. Roald pushed harder, convinced that idleness was far more dangerous than fatigue. He multiplied the recommended therapy hours, forced her to walk unaided into social occasions, even surprising Mel Brooks by striding into dinner a week after hospital release. He ran the household like a military campaign. Back in England, he formalized the strategy: banish inertia, boredom, frustration, and depression. At the RAF hospital, Pat endured a boot camp physio, and at home, Roald conscripted neighbors as amateur therapists to read, play word games, and drill memory exercises. Pat often swore at them. As a cigarette came out as an obligon, but slowly progress showed. She was like messing up her words massively. The real breakthrough came when Valerie Eaton Griffith, a local woman who brought structure and strategy, started working 6-hour days with Pat. Pat's eye patch came off, and on the 4th of August, 1965, she gave birth to their last child, Lucy. Photographed hours later, she sat up in bed, drinking beer and playing dominoes. By 1967, Roald and Val had her ready for a triumphant public return. Roald had written the text of her address, and Val coached Pat on it daily for a month before accompanying her on a flight to New York for the celebrity dinner. An Evening with Patricia Neal was a fundraiser for brain-injured children held at the Waldorf Astoria. Its starry guest list included Leonard Bernstein, Joan Crawford, Rock Hudson, Paul Newman, Alistair Cook, Mel Brooks, and Anne Bancroft, and it was Pat's first public appearance since the stroke. Her speech, including a line borrowed from Sonia Austrian to the effect that Tennessee hillbillies don't conk that easy, won her a standing ovation, and the event raised $90,000. The adulation stimulated Pat's desire to recover, and she began to believe she might truly pull off the movie comeback. That night, she too hailed her husband as a great man and saluted him for what he had done to force her back into the limelight. Later, she would articulate her gratitude more eloquently. I knew at the time that Roald the slave driver, Roald the bastard, with his relentless courage, Roald the rotten, as I had called him more than once, had thrown me back into deep water where I belonged. So, yes, fortunately, we survived the stroke.
Strokes and pneumonia, and it's just one disease, and abortions and bloody, and yeah, I mean, it's just incredible. And he's already had his massive success with the Chocolate Factory, right? And she's an Oscar-winning actress, and they know everybody.
They know everybody.
Right? They know everybody. Yeah, are there lives like this now? Are there?
I don't know.
I think there must be. I think they're hiding.
Yeah.
I think they're hiding their lives. Yeah. Wow. This is very unexpected. I knew hardly any of this. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Me too. Yeah.
Okay. Right. We've got to be getting toward the back half of the outline, Abby.
Yeah.
Surely.
Yeah, there's still some to go. I may have to skip over a little bit of it, but
that's all right.
Yeah.
We always have the After Dark where you're going to read the longest place name, and we're going to cover the spy business for patrons. And please support the podcast at patreon.com/artofdarkpod. We really, really appreciate it. We've all the patrons already. We appreciate you, and anybody who wants to jump on. Again, very, very much appreciated. Every dollar that comes in helps us spend a little more time preparing the episodes. We do this for the love of the game. And I hate to shill too much, but you know, it's nice to see the material support. Um,
Mm.
but what a surprising episode, Abby. It's just shocking.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
long.
Listen, that's what we're actually quite famous for our long episodes.
Yeah.
That's what we're known for. All right.
All right. So, Patricia Neal would go back to acting for the screen. But in the meantime, Roald needed to become the breadwinner. So he turned to the thing he hated, movies, to try and fund this. So yes, before the stroke, he met Robert Altman in Honolulu or in Hawaii, and he'd casually begun a First World War flying ace script with him, called "O Death, Where Is Thy Sting-a-ling-a-ling?" Yeah, Sting-a-ling-a-ling. Yeah, but the so Roald was initially hesitant to do this, as we said before, but the stroke had changed the game, and he needed cash urgently. So United, he tried to.
You always need cash urgently. Like,
Yes, yeah.
everybody needs cash urgently. Yeah,
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 he
yeah.
was sort of like he was sort of like meandering through the script initially, though, with Robert Altman attached to be the director, but at the time he'd never made a feature film before. So that's why the project was kind of moving slowly. But now that he needed the cash, United Artists had offered to pay him $150,000 for the script, but only if Altman gave up directing, which he refused. And so their friendship collapsed. Um, and then Roald Dahl, he was quoted as saying, "Look, I need the money. You can tear up the bloody thing. You can tear the bloody thing up if I don't direct it." Robert Altman would go on to say, and then Roald Dahl, he hired a very legendary deal maker named Swifty Lazar, who got Altman's 70.
Swifty Lazar. Hell yeah.
Yeah,
That person was Swifty Lazar was either going to be a baseball player or a deal maker in
a
Hollywood.
deal maker in
That's
Hollywood. Yeah.
Yep.
Um, so Altman got paid 75,000, Dahl got paid 67,500, and Altman never forgave him. And would many years later tell Roald Dahl's daughter Lucy that her father had betrayed him like no one had ever betrayed him in his life. But
Damn.
the yeah, I think he did go on to have a very successful career. But anyway, not directing, script by Roald Dahl. But the script for the film was not entirely wasted, because it had made an impression with Harry Saltzman and Albert Cubby Broccoli, two producers who had a deal with Artists and had owned the James Bond movie franchise. And so they were looking for a screenwriter for You Only Live Twice.
Didn't the Broccoli family just finally sell the Bond franchise?
Oh, I didn't know that.
I don't know. I could that could just be anecdotal or
Yeah,
speculative. In any case,
no
that's
idea.
funny. If your family is named Broccoli, you gotta you gotta do something really really cool to make up
Right.
for the fact that
Your
your
name is
family's name is
Cubby
Broccoli.
Broccoli.
It's like I decide who the next Bond is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
eat your broccoli.
So Roald quickly found his name at the top of their screenwriter options. And he was an obvious choice because he knew Ian Fleming well. And both men had worked for the same spy game, and were all also known as hard drinking, gambling, womanizing sophisticates. Uh, They also had shared the same attitude toward money. Despicable stuff, Fleming had once remarked to Dahl, adding, but it buys Renoirs. Um, so obviously in need of money now, for school bills and medical fees. He was delighted to be approached to write the latest Bond film. Um, and he had great admiration for Ian Fleming, but he was less enamored of his friend's writing skills, describing You Only Live Twice variously as tired, bad, and Ian's worst book. Um, he goes on to say, for his meeting with the two overweight moguls, Broccoli and Saltman, Dahl was ushered into an enormous room. He discovered that they also shared his low opinion of Fleming's novel, and they told him he could do anything he wanted with the story so long as he didn't change the Japanese location or mess about with the character of Bond or tamper with the franchise's famous girl formula.
Bond and the Giant Peach. I'd watch that. I'd watch the shit out of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had this again, totally surprising, but you could see
Very
how,
surprising to me too.
yeah,
Yes.
interesting. I bet he was a spy. I'm sure I am
Fleming?
strongly, no, our friend here,
Oh,
Roald Dahl.
Dahl.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I can't wait to hear more about that on the After Dark. Okay.
Indeed.
Again, this is a turn I did not expect. We're going from the chocolate factory to
I
shaken,
mean,
not stirred.
this is the man whose short story book was adapted into Tales of the Unexpected. His whole life
Yes.
was Tales of the Unexpected.
You know what? Very good. I
Yeah.
like that.
So the plot of the movie was almost completely different from Fleming's book, but not all of it was Roald's work. He was given a number of useful suggestions by an established Los Angeles television writer named Harold Jack Bloom, who proposed many of the narrative ideas that were in the final film. And yeah, nevertheless, a lot of the details, giant magnets, a battle between miniature helicopters, and a spacecraft that swallows another, were quintessential Dahl. Like the cunning magpie, one of his favorite birds, Dahl picked what he wanted from Bloom's outline and then made it his own. The first draft took him 8 weeks to write, including 1 week spent on holiday with his family by the sea in Tenby. He boasted, it was the biggest load of bullshit I have ever put my hand to, yet the $165,000 fee transformed the Dahl's finances. He even claimed to his neighbor that he'd made so much money from that movie he would never have to work again. Nevertheless, when Broccoli offered him the opportunity to adapt the children's book Chitty Chitty Bang Bang at the fee of 125,000 with a percentage of the profit and an agreement to pay the money into an offshore account, which saved Dahl paying 91% percent rates of UK income tax. 91%. Fuck.
What the fuck? What?
I don't even know what that was about. I didn't delve
That
into why it was
okay.
91% rates of
I'm
income
sure
tax.
I'm sure it would be like a staggered rate up to 91%, but that's still like
That's
slavery.
wild. Yeah.
That's just insane. Yeah. The queen doesn't need that
No.
much of your money. Yeah. Wow. We haven't had many
Uh,
offshore accounts on the pod.
yeah, the
Uh,
offshore
so
accounts come up a little bit later again.
okay. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. I dig it. I dig it.
Yeah. uh, he found he could not refuse the project, but it really did not excite him. He described the work as simple, rather childish, and the script as rubbish. He told Alfred Knopf that he was only doing the work to accumulate sufficient capital to take care of his children should he croak, as he did not believe in insurance. To Mike Watkins, he admitted that he was desperate for Pat to be working again so that he could abandon movies and get back to writing fiction. Chitty Chitty Bang Bang was as grim as the Bond film had been gratifying. Roald rapidly fell out with the director Ken Hughes, who was used to writing his own movies, and who contrived to take the script away from him after the first draft, claiming that Broccoli thought Roald's work was a piece of shit. Hughes claimed later that he had written every fucking word of the final script on a portable typewriter. He was almost certainly exaggerating. It's hard to believe, for example, that Dahl had not been directly involved in devising many of the new characters and storylines. The preposterous, truly scrumptious, for example, the Kingdom of Bulgaria, or the Toot Sweets, which unexpectedly summon all the dogs in the neighborhood to the candy factory. His fingerprint is almost apparent in the film's most memorable character, the sinister child catcher. The spindly, long-nosed monster captures children in a cage, baited with candy, sniffing them out in their hiding places with his extremely sensitive nose. He is Willy Wonka's evil doppelganger, treading that line between creepy and comic that Dahl had already made distinctly his own. Yes. By 1968, he returned to children's books. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory had sold over 600,000 copies in the US, and James and the Giant Peach had sold over 250,000. UK publishers, however, had repeatedly rejected them until one of Tessa's school friends showed James to her father, Raina Unwin of Ellen and Unwin. Spotting its potential, Unwin made an unusual deal. Roald would get nothing until costs were recouped, then 50% of the profits. It was a gamble, but it paid off. By 1967, both books were runaway successes in Britain. Yes, that
So
is how
the
that got published.
The Broadway play that fails gets picked up and goes to the UK. The 850,000 copies of the two books can't get published in the UK.
No,
Make it make sense.
but it just so happened that because his daughter was friends with the public. I believe it was the guy who published The Hobbit.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So good school, obviously, that
Yeah, that
these
makes
kids
sense.
are going to.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, okay. All right. I mean, that's a lot of copies. I mean, 850,000 copies of two books. I mean, and you're making bank too. You're just raking in money. I mean, that's well, good for him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Never has to work again.
Never has to work again. No.
No.
Yes. And apparently in the publishing of that, they published them somewhere in like Eastern Europe that was cheaper to publish, and so they got he was getting 50% of a book that was quite cheaply published, and so it was like a lot of money. Yeah. So he then started work on a beginner's book that would become the most autobiographical of all his children's stories, called Fantastic Mr. Fox. The tale was of a wily and incorrigible fox who ingeniously leads his starving family and friends out of danger when they are pursued by three evil farmers, Bogus, Bunce, and Bean. It reads in many respects like an allegory of its author's own recent history. Mr. Fox is resilient, resourceful, and never defeated by his troubles. So impressive is he that all his wife can do is look deeply into his eyes and tell him, just as Pat had done, "My darling, you are a fantastic fox." In other respects, too, its central character shared many of its creator's qualities, most notably, perhaps, his poacher's mentality. In the initial draft of the book, Mr. Fox's victory over his adversaries is achieved by a piece of simple theft. He digs his way out of trouble by burrowing a secret tunnel into the local supermarket where his family can help themselves to whatever food they desire. "From now on, we've got it made," said Mr. Fox. "Every night we can go shopping on Main Street. We can have anything we want. Isn't it fantastic?" And that is just what they did. They are still doing it today. Every night, Mrs. Fox makes a shopping list. Every night they go out shopping on Main Street. They get anything they want, and the storekeepers are still wondering where the stuff goes. The cops are still looking for the robbers. When the manuscript arrived at the publishers, Bob Bernstein, now president and CEO of Random House, the company that had acquired the Knopf imprint in 1960, faced a dilemma. He and the editors thought the book was weak. The writing is poor, the fantasy is unbelievable, and the plot is badly worked out. One of the internal readers it was one of the internal readers' verdicts. Also, while Dahl was perfectly prepared to celebrate petty larceny if the caper was sufficiently resourceful and cunning, the editorial staff at Random House were much more nervous. They were concerned that the book's apparent glorification of theft would not go down well with teachers, librarians, and parents. And there was another issue. The draft contained a passage in which Mr. Fox compared the conflict between the animals and the farmers to human warfare, which he condemned in terms that almost evokes passages of Sometime Never. The fact that the US military involvement in Vietnam was escalating and that the book was intended for readers as young as 4 made some of the staff at Knopf very uneasy. So the problematic manuscript then found itself on the desk of an enterprising young editor at Random House named Fabio Cohen. He seized the nettle. To the first problem, he put forward a compromise. The foxes should continue to steal, but instead of raiding a supermarket, Cohen proposed they should pilfer the farmyards of their tormentors instead. If they steal from the farmers, he explained, it would also hold something of a moral, namely that you cannot prevent others from securing sustenance without yourself paying a penalty. It was a clever solution and one that involved only a small amount of rewriting. Roald was delighted, and his enthusiasm at a good solution to the stalemate bubbled over. He also agreed to change the title from The Fantastic Fox to Fantastic Mr. Fox. The book was published in the fall of 1970. Once again, despite gloomy predictions from the experts in the juvenile division of Knopf, it quickly became a bestseller.
I had completely forgotten that he had written The Fantastic Mr. Fox. Yeah, and that's a very good film.
Very good film.
Really fun film. Yeah.
Very good film.
Yep.
Wes Anderson. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's probably my favorite Wes Anderson film.
It's
very, 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 very clever and just fun. Cool.
I worked with the lead animator one time.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. On a commercial. He did a stop motion commercial that we were working on one time.
Fascinating. Yeah. Doesn't Wes Anderson, he directs by like email?
Yeah, so I told you this. So Fantastic Mr. Fox was directed largely by email because Wes Anderson is a recluse and he had locked himself away in a hotel in Paris. And the film was being animated at one of the large studios in just outside of London somewhere. And so he would type out the email, and then if the animators didn't understand what he meant, he would act out the character and like send them a video. And apparently the editors reckon that they can piece together about 80% of the movie just with Wes Anderson acting out all the different characters.
I would love to see a documentary of that.
It would be cool, like DVD,
yeah, like
content,
a Criterion kind of a thing. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, also a bestseller. Yay. The Dahl family, however, was starting to crumble and crumbling from the top down. Patricia Neal was no Mrs. Fox. She was a complex, demanding, and extraordinary woman, but one from whom her husband now preferred to keep his distance. That largely unspoken tension was a problem. Sooner or later, something was bound to give. Roald had done much with his life. He had fought back from the brink of death. He had shot down and killed men, flying in his hurricane over the Mediterranean. He had aspired to touch the face of God. He had mixed with presidents and movie stars. He had slept with some of the most beautiful women in the world. He had made a career out of writing and kept his family together through a series of terrible personal disasters. But he had never yet fallen in love. In 1965, when Pat was pregnant with Lucy, Roald teased her that she was getting a bit long in the tooth and joked, "When you go into hospital to have the baby, I think I'll go to London and find myself a girl, someone not quite so fossilized." Pat shot back that he'd better be careful not to keel over while philandering. They bantered, but beneath it lay truth. Roald had strayed before, brief, almost rippleless affairs, but by the mid 1960s, cracks in the marriage were deepening. He had fought to keep his family together, but after Pat's stroke was now often isolated and unhappy at the head of his household. In 1967, his own health faltered. Surgery on his spine left him with infections, bleeding, and a fistula. His 82-year-old mother usually managed to come to her son's bedside whenever he was in hospital, but she too was now hospitalized after a series of minor strokes. Pat later wrote that she had tried to take his mother's place by Roald's side, but that he only closed his eyes, determined to suffer in silence. Sophie Magdalene remained in regular touch by telephone. On the morning of November the 17th, she called to see how Roald was feeling. It was the 5th anniversary of Olivia's death. Mother and son chatted briefly. It was to prove their last conversation, for Sophie Magdalene died just a few hours later. Roald was distraught. He had no idea she was so near the end. Sadly, he was too ill to attend the funeral. Her ashes were eventually taken back to Wales, where they were scattered next to her husband Harold's grave in Rhyadr churchyard, more than 47 years after he died. Her loss was a profound one for Roald. There is little doubt that the Norwegian grandmother in Dahl's 1983 novel The Witches, a wonderful storyteller, tremendously old and wrinkled with a massive wide body smothered in grey lace, is his own literary tribute to her. Returning home, subdued and weakened, he realized he could no longer rely on his strength to hold the family together. Pat, often away working, was seen by her daughter Tessa as helpless. She threw tremendous tantrums and she was very self-involved. She was a movie star. Then in 1972, Pat was filming a coffee commercial. At 33, a 33-year-old stylist called Felicity, Lissy Crossland, had been hired by the production company to be responsible for her wardrobe. Lissy was a striking beauty, her father's Indian blood immediately apparent in her raven hair, olive eyes, and Mediterranean complexion. She was also an English Roman Catholic aristocrat whose mother, Elizabeth Throckmorton, had been a descendant of a lady-in-waiting at the court of Elizabeth I, who married Sir Walter Raleigh. Her mother defied family convention by marrying a young doctor, later a brilliant thoracic surgeon, whose family hailed from Mangalore in India. His name was Alphonsus Liguori de Abreu. Lissy herself had married at the age of 21 and given birth to 3 children before she was 25, but her marriage was an unhappy one, and following a separation in 1973, she divorced, losing custody of her 3 girlies, Nisha, aged 12, Charlotte, 11, and Lorena, 10. She was now supporting herself by working in film commercials. Lissy's easy charm, her elegance, and her pragmatic gaiety were already widely celebrated in the industry, and her director, Adrian Lin, had asked her to take special care of his difficult star and in particular to help her sort out her wardrobe. Lissy drove down to Gypsy House uncertain what to expect. It was 11 o'clock in the morning when she arrived, and Pat was already drinking a Bloody Mary. She and Lissy discussed her clothes, and an hour or so later, Roald returned for lunch. He'd been out with Tessa collecting a new car. As soon as he saw Lissy, he experienced a violent and dramatic coup de foudre. No words were uttered and barely a look exchanged. It was the same with Lissy, who immediately found his presence electric. For the battle-hardened 56-year-old author, it was love at first sight.
It exists, people. It can happen to you. You just have to be a fighter pilot and write multiple best-selling books. No, that's great. Listen, I'm happy for him. And this is another age gap, though, right?
Oh yeah.
Age gap.
Age gap.
But
He's 56. She's 35. Yeah.
She's an adult. She can make up her mind. Yeah.
Pat had no idea at all what fire was burning under her nose. She remembered Lissy as a good-looking and hard-working professional who seldom left her side during the shoot. She responded warmly to the younger woman's humor, warmth, and her exceptional eye for decor and clothing, and enjoyed her company. Lissy recalled that the day before the shoot, she went to Pat's hotel to do a final fitting. Afterwards, Roald helped her carry her bags to the elevator. Trying to be polite, she pretended that she had read some of his books and told him she particularly enjoyed one called Someone You Like. It's not the name of the book. He did not correct her mistake, but asked her instead whether she wanted to join them for dinner that evening. Lissy told him she was too busy to accept. A few weeks later, she got another call from Roald inviting her down to Gypsy House for dinner and asking her whether she would mind giving Francis Bacon a lift as well. Lissy accepted the invitation with alacrity, but was devastated when she had to call and cancel because of unexpected filming commitments. After she returned, she invited Roald and Pat to dinner at her Battersea flat, where the other guests were Hugh Hudson, Ridley Scott, and her father. Over.
It's just like
Yeah,
every name. It's just boom,
everybody.
boom, boom, boom. Just
Francis
name,
Bacon,
name,
Ridley
name,
Scott,
name,
like, yeah.
name, name. Yeah,
Yeah.
fun.
Over supper, Roald asked Pat's permission to have dinner with Lissy at some point in the future while Pat was away on location. Pat would later maintain that Lissy ingratiated herself into their affections and that because she knew how to please, she was able to steal Roald away. She wanted him and she knew how to get him. The truth was that Roald made almost all the running. Lissy had felt a spark shoot between them and had been excited by the twinkle in his eye, but she had no idea what a profound effect she'd had on him until she went filming in Paris with Hugh Hudson a few weeks later. Roald had asked her, apparently quite innocently, whether she would mind picking up an umbrella he had left at the home of his old friend Annabella Power. Annabella had remained a confidant since he met her during the war, and she and Roald always had fun when they got together in New York, Los Angeles, Paris, or London. In Manhattan, he had once sneaked her into Gloria Vanderbilt's house while Vanderbilt was away, and the two of them had behaved like naughty schoolboys. Over the years, she had watched him with a wry smile as women ran to him and were mostly rebuffed. She also listened sympathetically when Roald had told her about his marriage problems. Lissy, however, had no idea of this past history. She simply thought she was running an errand. So she called Annabella one day after the shoot was over and arranged to collect the umbrella. She was walking into a setup, which was almost ruined by bringing along Hugh Hudson, because he was a fan of Annabella's and curious to meet her. In the end, however, she went alone. Inside the apartment, Annabella explained that Roald had written to her about his feelings. He can't stop thinking about you, she confided. He's madly in love with you. He thinks you're the most wonderful person in the world. When she finally asked about the umbrella, Annabella smiled slyly and replied, "What umbrella?" Back in London, Roald took Lissy out for dinner at the Curzon House Club. Afterwards, in the car, they kissed for the first time, and Roald told her he wanted to make love to her. It was the start of a 10-year affair that would culminate in divorce for Pat and marriage for Lissy. Yeah.
I mean,
Um,
this is fairly predictable.
yeah.
I'm not surprised. You
No.
know, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It was almost impossible to underestimate what a transformative effect the relationship had on him. At last, he had found a companion who shared his love of antiques, paintings, good food and wine. Lissy was young and beautiful, strong and experienced. She was amusing and intelligent. She was an aristocrat, but a subversive one who enjoyed breaking the rules. She needed no looking after. It even seemed as if destiny had been cut out for them when he discovered she had been born in Llandaff, just a few streets away from the Villa Marie where he himself had first drawn breath. His love for Lissy affected his personality too. The man his family had often found undemonstrative and cerebral began to become tactile and loving in ways that had startled them, and his letters to Lissy are suffused with the unexpected tenderness and vulnerability. Pat was still completely unaware of their affair, while the children continued to believe that Lissy was no more than a wonderful family friend, in whose company their father seemed unusually relaxed and happy. As Pat was often away on speaking engagements, Roald had bought a London flat in Battersea, not far from where Lissy lived, with some of the money invested in the children's trust funds. Tessa and Pat increasingly spent time there. When Pat was away and the kids were at boarding school, Roald felt free to call Lissy from Gypsy House whenever he wanted to speak with her. But when Pat was in Great Missenden, he would drive out of the village and call her from a local phone box. There was he was meticulous in his secrecy. One person, however, uh, tumbled to what was going on, and that was Tessa. A disturbed and rebellious youngster, she had been unhappy at her aunt's boarding school, Rodine, and moved instead to nearby Down House in Kent, another all-girls boarding school, which she had walked out of when she was just 16. It was the end of her formal education. Now, just as her father was beginning his relationship with Lissy, she had returned to live at home. One night she heard her father arrive back in London. It was quite late. Earlier in the day, he had suggested she take a wonderful new sleeping pill that he himself had recently been prescribed. She didn't think it strange, as her father had often offered her pills. She had taken it just before she went to bed, but it had little effect on her, and she was still awake when he returned. She heard him go to the telephone and make a call to Paris. Curious, she went to the top of the stairs to listen. Soon she realized her father was calling Lissy. I heard him on the phone and heard him say, Madame Crossland, say, s'il vous plaît. I think he just presumed he'd drugged me sufficiently not to hear. But I heard him
That's
have...
pretty dark.
It is pretty dark, isn't it?
Pretty fucking dark.
Here, Tessa, go to sleep.
Go to sleep while I call my mistress. Whoa.
Yeah.
Doggy.
But I heard him have this phenomenally amorous conversation, which was nothing like I'd heard him have with anyone else in my life, certainly not Mum. She returned to bed. Next morning, she called her aunt, Elsie, and went over to see her. She told her everything she'd heard. Elsie tried to calm her down and advise her that whatever else she did, she should not tell her father. But Tessa was not to heed this advice, and the next evening she asked her father bluntly if he was going to get a divorce. When he asked her why, she confronted him with her evidence. Caught in the headlights as if as it were, he exploded, accusing her of prying into his life, of snooping, of being a nosy little bitch. I'm fed up with it. I'm fed up with you, he told her. Get out of my house. I don't have any energy left for little bitches like you. Tessa was stunned. As she packed her bags to leave, Roald returned and told her that she could stay, but he wanted her to promise that she would talk to Lissy before she told her mother anything, and Tessa agreed. um,
Whoa.
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 Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not taking my mistress away from me, daughter.
I, you know, he's still not losing me because I know where he came from.
Mm-hmm.
However, this is bad behavior,
Yeah.
obviously. Yeah. But I understand it
Mm-hmm.
if it makes any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oof. The pill thing is crazy.
The pill thing is
the pill
crazy.
thing is fucking crazy.
Apparently, he was just like, he was very good with the kids when they were kids, but he just could not handle teenagers. And so,
Well,
like,
listen, who fucking can? I mean, yeah, who wants to, yeah, no, forget it.
yeah. Yeah. So Lissy talked Tessa out of telling Pat. And then the Dahls and the Crosslands went on holiday to Menorca. And then this is sort of when Pat became suspicious. It was quite a while before she became suspicious. I think she was just very busy. She was doing a lot of talks and like movies and stuff. And he was very, as I said earlier, like meticulous. So she did find out, and then they but he didn't want to get a divorce and like leave the house. Like he just loved his writing hut so much that he was not going to leave his marriage and he was not going to leave his kids. And so him and Lissy split for a little bit, but things became like super sour between
Listen,
him and Pat.
I would stay in a marriage if there was a riding hut.
Could you not just build another riding hut?
But this is my riding hut that I'm comfortable in,
Just
and I
like
will.
move the riding hut.
You got you gotta work on the marriage for the riding hut. Hmm.
I mean, anyway, it was not to be. They split up for a while and then they started seeing each other again, uh, under like fake names at hotels and blah blah blah. And but Pat became suspicious again. And then in 1979, she went to um, an abbey in a Benedictine monastery in Bethlehem, Connecticut, where the abbess Dolores Hart was a former movie actress, and she sort of like stayed there and came to come to terms with her failing marriage. This is Pat. And then the same summer, she went to Martha's Vineyard for a little while, and she fell in love with the island, and like I think bought somewhere there, and like the kids came to visit her, and Roald came to stay for a time, and then he wrote her a letter to say that he is old and he can't travel anymore and he doesn't want to go to Martha's Vineyard because he finds it grotesque and 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 then after a year in limbo where Roald was in England and Pat was in the US, they agreed to divorce in 1983, nearly 30 years after they were first married.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's
Both
a
for the
shame.
best.
It's a
Yeah.
shame, but at the same time, I mean, he's
As a couple, they
if
went through a lot.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
30. I mean, I'm not a, I'm not a divorce advocate, but I mean, at the same time, it's just sort of like if you're making each other miserable and,
Well, and
it's
and
just
according to the both of them, they were never actually in love in the first place.
right, right. It was just a marriage of convenience, sort of,
Yeah, they
yeah.
were like, "Oh, we should probably do this," and
Sure,
Charles Marsh
sure.
thinks it's a good idea. So,
Right, right. But I mean, and she won an Oscar. I mean, something worked out. Something
yeah,
worked, I mean, and people didn't used to marry for love. They
right,
used to, so we just call it an old-fashioned marriage that ended in divorce.
yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
There you go.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so now that
We
he's
must be
divorced,
we must be nearing the end. We have
yeah,
to be. He's getting he's getting very very old here, and
yes,
he's lived so much life. And
yeah,
wow,
yeah.
go on, go on.
Okay. Though happier with Lissy than he had been in decades, Roald in his later years became notorious as an outspoken, hot-tempered troublemaker. He admitted as much himself. My faults and foibles are legion. I drink too much whiskey and wine. I smoke too many cigarettes. I hate my own birthday, and I'm going bald. Friends blamed his moods partly on chronic back pain, but also his overpowering personality and need to dominate. The same bluntness would mark his publishing life in the late 60s and 70s as Fantastic Mr. Fox and later The Twits and George's Marvelous Medicine appeared. Dahl clashed bitterly with his American publishers at Knopf and Random House. What began as arguments over royalties grew into full-blown rows. He once told his agent, I am a seller, and as a seller, I have the right to ask any damn price I like. But his brinkmanship soured friendships. Bob Gottlieb, his brilliant young editor, eventually snapped, writing to Dahl that he was bullying everyone around him, and that unless you start acting civilly towards us, There is no possibility of our agreeing to publish you. So there was this whole big
Damn.
thing where because of the 91% tax nonsense, he had wanted his American royalties to go through, I guess, like shell companies in a Swiss bank account.
Fuck yeah. That
Yeah, it was
rocks.
like, but
I
it was
love
like
that.
it was an arrangement that like they didn't understand, he didn't understand, and like the only way that the Americans, like I am not smart enough financial wise to explain this properly, but like
Sure.
the only way that the Americans could pay him their royalties in this way is to like is to like buy services from his company that they were paying.
I
So they
see.
put him on like a 4 book deal, and
Okay.
they couldn't pay off his royalties until he had finished the books. So these royalties were coming in, but he wasn't seeing any of them because he hadn't finished these books. And he hated this scheme that he was the architect of in the first place.
It just sounds like a complete pain in the ass. But
It
I
was a complete pain in the ass.
I love a Swiss bank account. Have you ever
Yeah.
been into a Swiss bank, Abby?
No, I have not been to
They're
Switzerland.
beautiful. They're beautiful.
But like,
You could eat an omelet off the floor of a Swiss bank.
right. But all of
Yeah.
this would later come to bite him in the ass because HMRC came after him and he ended up owing them £700,000.
What? See, this is where like I think you just renounce citizenship and take citizenship somewhere else.
Well, he's a Norwegian citizen,
Right.
so yeah,
Yeah. Wait,
yeah,
a Norwegian citizen and a subject of the crown.
yeah. I mean, the reason he couldn't go to Africa for ages was because he only had a Norwegian
Mm,
passport. He
mm.
didn't have British
Okay.
passport. Yeah.
Okay. But he became a British citizen.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that was a
Yeah.
mistake. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to speed through a little bit of this.
Sure.
When Charlie and the Chocolate Factory got made, he did write the script for that. He hated the film. He was embroiled in controversy because the the film was about to come out, or they were in the process of writing it, or it had been like announced. But in the book, the Oompa Loompas had been described as African pygmies, and
Ah,
the NAACP were like, "Fuck no." um, so and he was like, "Oh God!" Like he hadn't realized that this would uh cause such a thing, and he didn't want it. He didn't intend for it to be like offensive. So the Oompa Loompas were changed to like little orange people,
hmm.
which they then became in the film, and then retroactively in the book became that as well because they weren't that originally.
I see. I see.
Yeah. So
Okay.
that came out because of the film.
Hmm.
He dismissed the film as crummy. He thought the music was trashy. He attempted to cut the big famous song "The Candyman." He hated that. Uh, and he didn't like any of the changes that David Seltzer had made to his script. And he did not like Gene Wilder's performance, which he thought was pretentious.
Crazy.
Yeah,
Because now it's
so
just completely iconic.
yeah, it is completely iconic. But he had wanted Spike Milligan and Peter Sellers to audition for the role, and
Yep.
had begged
Spike
Spike Milligan
Milligan,
to
friend of
shave
the
off his
pod.
beard to audition.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Did Spike Milligan shave off his beard
he
to
did. Yeah,
audition? Oh, he did.
both were rejected in favor of Wilder.
Hmm.
And yeah, the whole thing annoyed him, even though he made $300,000 for writing it.
At
Yeah,
this point, what's $300,000 between friends?
yeah,
Yeah. What? Yeah. Nah. That's crazy.
yeah. But now we come to his sharpest controversy or
Uh-huh.
controversy. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Let me
Yeah.
guess. Let me guess. Yeah.
In 1983, Dahl reviewed a book about the 1982 Israeli invasion of Lebanon called God Cried. God Cried was a 140-page large format book of reportage about the atrocities committed against the people of Beirut by the invading Israeli army. It was written by an Australian war reporter named Tony Clifton and focused on the large number of civilian casualties sustained in the conflict. A series of graphic photographs, mainly showing the innocent victims of warfare, including a number of severely mutilated and dead children, illustrated the text. Tessa, his daughter, had suggested to the editor that her father, who in the past had donated money to the Palestinian educational charities through International Help for Children, that he review it for a publication called the Literary Review. She knew also that Roald had recently met and been impressed by the British surgeon Pauline Cutting, who had worked in Beirut's hospitals during the invasion. He at first refused because he hated reviewing, but once he got the book, his sense of injustice was stirred. His response to both the text and the heartrending images was overwhelming, and he changed his mind about reviewing it, and the result was a 2.5-page article entitled Not a Chivalrous Affair. And it began. In June 1941, I happened to be in all places Palestine, flying with the RAF against the Vichy French and the Nazis. Hitler happened to be in Germany, and the gas chambers were being built, and the mass slaughter of Jews was beginning. Our hearts bled for the Jewish men, women, and children, and we hated the Germans. Exactly 41 years later, in June 1982, the Israeli forces were streaming northwards out of what used to be Palestine into Lebanon, and the mass slaughter of the inhabitants began. Our hearts bled for the Lebanese and Palestinian men, women, and children, and we all started hating the Israelis. Referring frequently to his own glowing memory of the beauties of the Palestinian landscape and the kindness of its people, Dahl condemned the Israeli government using the kind of inflammatory rhetoric he had practiced over many a dinner but seldom in print. Marion Goodman felt he was using his desire to shock in order to defend what he perceived as the victims in this particular conflict. If anyone was a big loudmouth, he'd hit them right back with the same treatment, she told me. But if somebody couldn't defend themselves, he never attacked. He was very protective. In this instance, his rhetoric, though sympathetic to the Palestinians, got the better of him, and some of the article reads as if it was written deliberately to irritate Jewish readers. Most
Mm.
inflammatory was the repeated comparison of Israel to Nazi Germany. Uh,
They're gonna love that.
yeah,
That's not gonna cause any controversy.
yeah.
Yeah, holy shit. Yeah.
Menachem Begin and his Minister of Defense, Ariel Sharon, were branded as war criminals whose actions condemned the whole nation. Must Israel, like Germany, be brought to her knees before she learns how to behave in this world? Dahl concluded. He dispatched the review as soon as he had written it with a note to the editor. If I have said anything inaccurate or if I injudicious, do let me know. Yeah. Then
We're not in the
so
chocolate factory anymore.
we're not in the chocolate factory
We've
anymore.
left the chocolate factory.
And
Damn.
so he said that,
I
and
had only heard about this. I didn't realize this was sort of what it was about. And of course, this wouldn't be controversial now.
no,
Of course,
well, and
we wouldn't get into any trouble for talking about it on the pod, would we?
yeah, well, I mean, there are a lot of people who are saying similar things now. So, like, there might be some people who
Yeah.
listen to this and think,
I
well,
have
is it
no
really that bad? It doesn't sound like
Yeah,
anti-Semitism.
we're not
It
a
sounds like anti-Zionism.
this is not a political podcast, and we're not
Yeah.
weighing in on the issue. We're just reporting what Roald Dahl had to say.
But It gets much worse.
Oh, fuck.
Okay.
It's like
So,
our friend Wagner.
yeah, it gets into Wagner territory. All right. So, when Lissy saw what he had written, she was horrified, amazed he'd not shown it to her before he sent it off. She sensed immediately that his unrestrained anger was certain to offend Jewish people in ways he had not begun to imagine. She urged him to change it, but he refused. His response to her was the equivalent of the Duke of Wellington's publish and be damned. He went away with her on holiday. Upon their return, he found that an enormous row had indeed ignited in his absence. Years of press releases about Dahl's macabre imagination and his nasty mind had caught up with him. All over the media, he was branded as an anti-Semite. He was bombarded with angry letters and phone calls. He even received death threats. He tried to put the records straight in a letter to the Times, claiming that to call him anti-Jewish was as foolish as to call him anti-Arab simply because he was critical of Colonel Gaddafi. I am not anti-Semitic, he declared. I am anti-Israel, but it was too late. He made matters much worse. I don't even know if I really want to say this. When over the phone to Mike Corrin.
Retweets are not endorsements. Just because we tell the fucking story does not mean we're adopting the ideas. I don't know why
No,
this is so difficult for people to fucking understand.
yeah,
Right?
no,
And
nobody clip this.
yeah, it's just ridiculous that it even has to be said.
Yeah,
But this is one of the most sensitive issues in the world, and so we are aware of the sensitivity around this. But
yeah.
it is Art of Darkness. We're telling the story. Abby, tell the story.
Okay, and this whole thing is largely what the John Lithgow play was about.
I see.
Um,
Yeah.
so he made matters much worse when, over the phone to Mike Corrin of the New Statesman a few days later, he confided that he felt there was a trait in the Jewish character that does provoke a certain animosity. Maybe it's a lack of generosity towards non-Jews. Even a stinker like Hitler didn't just pick on them for no reason.
Ugh. Ay, ay, ay. Man, oh man.
This, yeah. The comment was significant in many ways. It showed that even in public, when his back was against the wall, Dahl was likely to become antagonistic rather than conciliatory. It manifested the bluntness that had been apparent since the plane
Oompa
crash in the desert.
loompa oompa
Yeah.
dee doo.
And made clear how little he cared about what other people, particularly in the literary establishment, now thought of him. So, in another context, in this case, a quarrel with an American film producer, he did not think twice. In a quarrel with an American film producer, he did not think twice about describing the man in a private letter to Dirk Beauregard as the wrong sort of Jew and exaggerating his faults accordingly.
Oof. Sheesh.
Oh,
Oh, damn.
oh man.
But that's not
Uh,
gonna. That's just not gonna fly
no.
at all. I mean, it's just bonkers. I mean, what year
Yeah.
is it?
1983?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oy, oy,
Yeah.
oy.
A couple of months after he'd written the review of God Cried, Roald Dahl was profiled by Peter Lennon for The Times. There, Dahl acknowledged that because the piece was written so fast and so emotionally, he had perhaps somewhat overplayed his hand. Lennon concluded that it seemed Dahl had simply refused to accept the conventions of international political debate. This was true. He would do the same when, in 1989, he was almost a lone voice in the British media criticizing the novelist Salman Rushdie when a fatwa, an Islamic death sentence, was issued against him by the Ayatollah
Khomeini,
Khomeini, yeah,
Khomeini, Khomeini.
of Khomeini
You're
of
you're you're
Iran.
f- you're 4.5 hours in, so
Yeah,
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 yeah. You're
yeah,
gonna make it. You're in the home stretch.
yeah. uh, After Rushdie had supposedly slurred the Prophet Muhammad in his novel The Satanic Verses. It was ironic that Roald, who called Rushdie a dangerous opportunist, it was ironic that Roald called Rushdie a dangerous opportunist because he had put the lives of his publishers and their employees at risk. Also attacked Rushdie for not having exercised self-censorship before he published his book. In an interview conducted shortly after he died, Roald Dahl refused to comment on this incident because it stirred up such passions in people. The only thing I'm going to say is that every writer should be able to censor up to be his own censor up to a point. I don't hold with all this. I'm a member of the Society of Authors stuff. They seem to think that unlike other people, they have a God-given right to publish exactly what they want. All of us should exercise a degree of censorship. Here again, of course, the pot was calling the kettle black. In most contexts, almost everyone who knew him agreed he had precious little capacity for self-censorship, nor was he interested in consistency. Making a point with force was much more important.
And this is a guy too, but you look back at his life and you can kind of again see why he has no fucking filter. And it's just
Yeah,
like I just don't give a shit. I could see I'm not endorsing anything he said or didn't say or whatever the fuck, but like you could see why a guy like this would just be like, just get I'm gonna yeah, no filter.
yeah,
I mean, I shot down Germans over Athens. I had my head dunked underwater. I've had, children nearly die. It's just a life that it accumulates to the point where it's just like you're telling a journalist on the phone whatever the fuck.
but yeah,
Just no filter.
this is this isn't gonna get out.
And even if it does, like, meh,
Yeah,
and also you're like rich beyond anything. You've met presidents. You've slept with the most beautiful women in the world. Your wife won an
yeah,
Oscar. It's just like yeah, you can see how you would become cavalier to a fault.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oof.
He then well, the 1980s were quite prolific for him in terms of writing books
And he's still
because
writing.
he's still writing, yeah.
Yeah.
So he wrote The Big Friendly Giant. Um at around 1978 he started collaborating with Quentin Blake, who's an illustrator who's like their books the books with Roald Dahl's words and Quentin Blake's illustrations are now like synonymous. Like Quentin Blake is like the Roald Dahl illustrator, and a lot of people would associate that imagery with
Mm-hmm.
they had a very good collaboration, sort of from BFG onwards. So I did BFG, The Enormous Crocodile, which was more of a children's book, little children, and then he wrote, he'd done George's Marvelous Medicine, uh, Matilda must be. Oh, throughout the 1980s, his books became ever more successful. Yes. The Witches, which was published in 1983, a year after the BFG was dedicated to Lissy. It was another massive hit with the public. There was a little bit of controversy with that one because some people thought that it was misogynistic. Um, uh, the publishers had to get him to like tone down like the the descriptions of two-faced vicious bald hags with claw-like fingers like down a bit, but like uh because the hero of the book was a young boy and his grandmother, like it got away with it because he Roald Dahl was like, how could I possibly be misogynistic when the heroine of this book is like an elderly grandmother.
Mm.
So there was a little bit of stuff there, but like the publishers around this time were a bit like sensitive to the way that he would describe things in books because he would use descriptions that were like a little bit disgusting or gross, and this was unpopular with like the publishers and the editors and librarians for whatever
Yeah,
reason. Like he
you
had
have to
a
satisfy the librarians because if the
yeah the
librarians are happy, then you're selling, all the copies. Yeah.
Yeah, he had a little bit of a a career long battle with librarians who didn't like him very much, but the kids loved it. Like they loved the language of these books and like things being disgusting. And there was like a quote in George's Marvelous Medicine about the I think there was an older woman in that book where she was described as having like a puckered up lips like a dog's bottom,
Ah,
and so you can imagine like she was
uh,
drinking this medicine that George
sure, 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 sure.
was poisoning her with, and like her whole body started shriveling up. And I used to read these books to my grandmother when I was a child,
Oh,
and
fun.
my grandmother, who was very buttoned up and very modest and all of this sort of thing, would shriek with laughter whenever I would say this line about the puckered
Yeah,
up dog's bottom.
sure,
And then
sure.
when she was living with us, my grandmother had got cancer and she came in and stayed with us. I was reading Matilda to her, and Matilda's quite a big book. I think it was one of his last novels that he wrote, and she died before I had finished. And
Mm.
the story that I have vague memories of it. I was about 11. The story was that when my father told me that my grandmother had died, I one of the first things out of my mouth was, "But I haven't finished the book." And
Wow.
I read the rest of it to her sitting next to her coffin in the funeral home.
Whoa, wow. Oh, that's a very moving story, Abby. Well, no wonder you want to cover Roald Dahl.
Yeah,
It's very meaningful. Yeah, thanks
yeah.
for sharing that, Abby. That's very
Uh,
meaningful. Yeah, we all have these. This is one of the reasons we do this show is that we all have these relationships with these artists. Not always, I mean, but when you do, it means a lot. And then it's fascinating to learn about their shitty behavior
yeah.
and their horrible lives because it gives you it deepens the appreciation of the work, I think. Whether or not the behavior is good or bad. I mean, like any
Mm.
full life, these aren't saints that we're covering, right? And even saints have
Yeah.
horrors in their lives. So that's what this show is. Thanks for sharing that, Abby. That's very moving.
You're welcome.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just racing through the 1980s.
Yeah, we
Uh,
gotta, yeah, we're gonna be crashing here
yeah,
into the end,
we're
and
gonna.
then and then on the After Dark for patrons, Patreon.com. I'm gonna do a commercial right now to give you a quick break. Patreon.com/Art of Dark Pod, Substack.com/at Art of Dark Pod. We're gonna Abby's gonna read the longest place name, and then we're gonna cover all of the spy business
The spy
from
business.
Roald Dahl, one of the most fascinating figures we've covered, one of the darkest, strangest lives, like one of the fullest, most intense lives we've covered, with sort of everything on the bingo card. And so thanks for doing this, Abby. These are not easy episodes to do. There's a lot to prepare, and then just the marathon of actually doing the thing,
Yeah,
too. It is can be very draining. So I hope you're feeling still feeling energetic, and
yeah,
and
yeah.
and we'll take a break. Yep,
Yeah.
yep, yeah. We'll take
I
a
just,
break.
I just scrolled ahead to what was coming next, and I had
Okay,
completely forgotten about that. But
okay,
yeah,
okay, okay.
it
What's
keeps
coming
going.
next? What's coming
Okay,
next?
so 1980s, he did all the books that we had mentioned, as well as Boy and Going Solo, which were his like semi-fictionalized autobiographies about his childhood with boarding school, and Going Solo was about his airplane crash. sort of hybrid autobiographies. And then he was wrestling with Matilda. He sort of didn't know what it was, and at the same time had gone through like a bowel surgery, and so was getting a bit exhausted and old by this point. And then in January 1990, he took Lissy, Ophelia, and Lissy's youngest daughter, Lorena, to Jamaica. And they stayed at the Jamaica Inn on the North Coast, which was a place that brought back wartime memories of Ian Fleming, Noel Coward, and Lord Beaverbrook, who were all people he hung out with in Jamaica when he was staying with Charles Marsh. And so at the age of 73, he's out there walking around like an arthritic giraffe, but still the commanding figure at the center of things, a grizzled lion surrounded by three glamorous lionesses. So Ophelia was about to start college in Boston and remembered it as this like giant punctuation mark, like the last time that she saw her father unburdened by the weight of illness. And he was on the beach making up limericks and spinning yarns about other hotel guests. And 26-year-old Lorena, this is Lissy's daughter, wasn't feeling well, and she had this persistent headache and felt like there was a continuous buzzing in her ear. And at one point asked Ophelia if she could peer inside because she thought there might be an insect trap down there. A quiet, self-contained beauty who had recently become fashion editor at Harper's, Lorena's features and skin color revealed more of her family's Indian blood than either of her sisters. Roald had nicknamed her the Burmese cat because of her slenderness and inscrutability, and often took delight in trying to provoke responses out of her. He seldom succeeded. When the buzzing and headaches did not go away, Roald called in a local doctor who diagnosed an ear infection and gave her some antibiotics. Back in London, another physician would misdiagnose her symptoms as labyrinthitis, a viral infection of the inner ear. In reality, she was suffering from an undiagnosed and aggressive brain tumor. Oblivious of the impending disaster, Lorena continued to get on with her busy and exciting life, unaware just what a tiny amount of it remained to her. Shortly after she returned from Jamaica, she went to South Africa to supervise a shoot there for a magazine. And back in England, the February weather had been unseasonably warm and mild with temperatures in the mid 60s Fahrenheit. The forecast was warm and mild. One evening at 11 o'clock, the telephone rang. Roald and Lissy were in their bedroom. Ophelia was sitting at the other end of the bed, massaging Lissy's feet. She picked up the phone and an unfamiliar voice asked for Mr. Dahl. Ophelia passed the phone over to her father. Everything stopped at that moment, she recalled. I stopped at the end of the bed and watched my father's face as he held the phone. He said nothing. His mouth opened and he raised his scared eyes to me. I knew then that Lorena was dead and nothing for Lissy would ever be the same again. She had died at the airport of a sudden aneurysm caused by the tumor on her brain.
Ugh. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Again,
another
it can
dead
just
stepchild. Yeah.
it can just happen, boom, like that. I mean,
Yeah.
really. And so just take care of yourself and try to live now and catch now, and don't live for tomorrow, and don't live in the past.
Hmm.
Right? Yep.
Um, yeah. So Lorena's loss accelerated his decline. He was already exhausted, plagued by anemia, blurred vision, and stomach troubles. But still, he was working. He wrote a book called SEO Trot, which is tortoise backwards. Um, and unlike all of his other books, this was about two adults, and it was a love story rather than about children. Like, and nothing particularly dark happens in this story. So it was SEO Trot is a novella, and it's lovely.
Thank
Um,
God.
yeah. But people thought that perhaps now being in a marriage where he'd found love, that SEO Trot was reflected his feelings for Lissy. And then he wrote The Min Pins, which I haven't read, but it was what does it say? Uh, The Minpins, on the other hand, was a more characteristic Lake Dahl in that its hero is a warm-hearted and mischievous child who longs for adventure and finally finds it in the forest of sin, discovering a race of tiny people in the woods, learning to fly on the back of a swan, and ultimately destroying a terrifying monster deep within the heart of the forest. In hindsight, the book reads like a poetic farewell. Its scale is grander, its tone more lyrical, and its range more monumental than anything he had written since Sometime Never. For someone who had made his name by shattering some of the conventions of children's literature, it was also curiously old-fashioned and metaphysical, particularly when it came to evoking the ecstasy of flying. And then, uh, okay. So even as illness advanced, he was setting his affairs in order. His lawyer, Goodwin, suggested that Dahl might be able to minimize future inheritance tax liabilities and ensure Lissy's control over the exploitation of his works by forming a partnership with her to which he could transfer all of his existing copyrights. At high speed, Roald decided to go ahead with the plan, creating Dahl and Dahl and arranging for Goodwin to make another trip to Gypsy House so he could explain the plan to the children. The visit was, as Goodwin remembered, not a consultation exercise, but an information exercise. Roald was predictably direct. I'm leaving everything to Lissy, he told his children. I trust her absolutely to do right by you and to do right by the copyrights, and you must too. Lucy recalled her own and her siblings' shock when they realized that apart from certain substantial specific gifts and legacies, it seemed they were being cut out of their father's will. At one point, she asked whether there were any limits on Lissy's control, and she remembered Goodwin's reply, yes, she can take back whatever percentage she likes. Roald had simply muttered, good. Lucy was horrified, as Goodwin went back to London and their father sloped off to his bedroom to have a rest. But he then got very angry at his children because they assumed that they were going to get nothing, but really he was angry that they didn't trust Lissy to protect their interests, and Lissy turned out to be a very good decision maker and very good at sharing the wealth with the children, which would go on
Thank,
and on and on because
thank
his
goodness.
books are still selling.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, I
and
mean
they're
my
gonna
that estate is I have no idea how much that's worth, but it's
right.
worth millions and millions and millions of dollars. No question.
And interestingly, he kind of did the opposite of what his father had done.
Ah,
Because his
so he
father had not left anything to Sophia Magdalene and left it
mm,
all to the children,
aha,
and
aha.
and Roald was leaving it all to Lissy, or like a trust that Lissy was
Sure,
in
yeah.
charge of, and
Yeah.
she was to be the one to distribute.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah,
wills are wild. I mean, remember Picasso had no will. Remember that?
Picasso. Yeah,
Fucking Picasso. You
you
just go like
absolute prick.
just crazy. Yeah. Nobody likes to think about it, but I mean, you have to.
Yeah,
If you have anything, you have to.
if you have anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
His own physical decline first became apparent when in April 1990, while visiting Tessa in hospital after she had a minor operation, Roald suddenly found that he did not have the strength to get out of his chair. Tests revealed that he was suffering from sideroblastic anemia, a condition that, while chronic, was not life-threatening. With steroids and regular blood transfusions, it appeared he could keep the illness at bay for several more years. In the summer, there was a reconciliation with Pat, who returned to Gypsy House to celebrate Theo's 30th birthday. For many years, she had been embittered by Roald's rejection, and in her autobiography, she admitted that in this period, she could not get the thought of Lissy out of her mind. Like a venom, it poisoned the times I should have been concentrating on other things. But Roald had been generous to her since they were divorced, and there were other consolations. She had felt more involved in her children's life since the separation and since Lucy and Ophelia had returned to the United States. She also felt she had come closer to God, and that this had given her an unexpected capacity to forgive. Soon, Lissy and Pat would bury the hatchet and become friends once more. By the summer, Roald was hospitalized in Oxford, enduring endless transfusions. Yet he was never a passive patient. Even in extremis, his mischievous nature and love of breaking rules did not desert him, and it was particularly evident when it came to smoking in hospital. One day, he singed his eyebrows trying to light a cigarette furtively on the communal gas ring. Another time, he got stuck while craning out of the window to puff away on one of his Cartier gaspers without being detected. It took a gaggle of nurses to drag him back inside, while an irate patient in the neighboring room complained of clouds of cigarette fumes that were billowing in through the window. On another occasion, because dogs were not allowed in the hospital, he arranged for Chopper, his pet Jack Russell, to be hauled in a basket in a window several stories up just so he could see him. When the hospital authorities experimented with nurses wearing ordinary clothes rather than uniform, Roald sent Lissy out to buy new outfits for them. He thought the idea was ridiculous. Not only did it mean that the patient was unsure who was a nurse and who wasn't, but he felt it was a terrible imposition on all the nurses themselves. Yet he dispatched Lissy to Marks and Spencer's to buy a selection of shirts and cardigans and invited them all into his room to choose what they wanted. It was like a market stall, Lissy remembered with a fond chuckle. In mid-November, Ophelia flew in from Boston for a long weekend and was shocked at her father's decline. He could hardly walk to the car. His imminent mortality was transparently clear to her now, although his joy de vivre and sufficiently intact, and still took enormous pleasure one evening in teaching her exactly how to decant a bottle of vintage port. She flew back to Boston 2 days later, returning to her apartment, only to find a message from Lucy telling her to come back immediately because he had taken a turn for the worse and been readmitted to the hospital. She closed the door of her flat and headed straight back to the airport. But when Ophelia had got to the hospital, her father seemed to have rallied again. He told her that he had just had the worst day he could remember since he crashed his plane in 1940. I think I almost bought it, he told her in a slow, whispery voice. He started to ponder which of his children would be able to get themselves out of the burning plane. I'm not frightened of falling off my perch, he told her. If Olivia can do it, so can I. He was becoming weaker by the hour, incontinent, and now the pain was incessant. There was debate within the family as to what to do. Lissy wanted to keep him alive as long as possible. His children felt he was suffering too much. They wanted him to be given morphine, which might hasten the end but relieve his pain. At night in his hotel room, Tessa heard her father talking in his sleep to his mother and to Olivia as if he was visiting them, and then he would wake up and say to me, Teddy, what are we going to do? This went on for several nights, but each morning, just when Tessa was certain it was clear he needed this ultimate pain relief, Lissy's arrival would cause him to perk up as if there was nothing wrong and he wasn't in pain at all. To Ophelia, it seemed as if his father was fighting now just for Lissy. His breathing became ever more labored, and he was fitted with an oxygen mask. By the night of November 22nd, a crisis seemed to be approaching. Though impossibly weak, Roald had finally managed to heal a rift between himself and Tessa. After nights of sleeping in his room at the hospital, Tessa had decided to go and stay with friends in Oxford. As she left the room, she spontaneously went over to kiss her father's mossy forehead. She knew he hated physical contact, but as she did so, the man she hailed as the love of her life, who had always been so reticent in showing her affection, quietly whispered that he loved her very much indeed. Tessa was so overwhelmed that she pulled off her glasses and smashed them against the wall. Later that night, Roald became very thirsty. Ophelia tried to get him to drink some water, but found he had not the strength to swallow. He went back to sleep. Carefully, she peeled a tangerine and dribbled some of its sweet juice onto his parched lips. He woke again and looked at her. You know, I'm not frightened, he repeated. It's just that I will miss you all so much. It was the last sentence he would utter. Not long afterwards, Lissy came in from her camp bed in the next room. Now she too could see that he was so near the end that he only had one option left. At about 3 a.m, the Dahl family pulled together. As a nurse prepared to administer some morphine, Roald appeared to be completely unconscious. Ophelia and Lissy put on a tape of Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto, one of his favorite pieces. But Roald had one more surprise left for them. As the needle pricked his skin, he opened his eyes and muttered, "Ow, fuck!" They were to be his final words. As he died, Lissy cradled him in one arm.
Ow,
while
fuck.
her while her other hand covered his eyes, lightly as though coaxing him to sleep. Tessa stood at the end of the bed, her arms folded like a sentry guarding him. Lucy waited outside. She had already exchanged her final words with her father. He had exhorted her to look after her children. An hour or so after he passed away, the press began to call the hospital. Later, driving back to Gypsy House through the Vale of Aylesbury, where Roald had lived so much of his life, Lucy and Ophelia sat in the car in silence. There seemed to be nothing to say. Then, quite suddenly, two white doves swooped down out of the trees and flew along beside them, their wings almost touching the passenger window of the car. The birds traveled with them for almost a mile before disappearing back into the woods. Both Lucy and Ophelia felt they had witnessed a gesture from another world. Several weeks after her father died, Ophelia went back into the hut. Nothing had been moved. The floor was still covered in dust, cobwebs, and cigarette ash. Her father's pencils were still sharpened like thin rockets pointed upwards, ready to pick up the story exactly where he had left it off. On his green baize board was a sheaf of lined yellow paper on which he always wrote. There were rough notes sketched out for the beginning of a story, even a few illustrations. Though his body had run out of steam, it was clear Dahl's inventive brain had been whirring away in this little hut, dreaming of stories until he was admitted to hospital for the last time. Rarely has such a writer lived such an extraordinary and eventful life. Without his writing, his life would still have been a remarkable one. He had lived it with energy, passion, and commitment, and remained true to one of his favorite fragments of verse, 4 lines written by the poet Edna St. Vincent Millay. My candle burns at both ends. It will not last the night. But my foes, and my friends, it gives a lovely light. The CEO of Penguin Books, Peter Meyer, quoted those lines at Roald's funeral in the ancient church in Great Missenden, where a huge number of friends turned up to bid him farewell. In his eulogy, Meyer remembered him not only as a great writer and a supreme family man, but also as a benefactor and protector. He was like a firework, unpredictable, volatile, and exciting. He could delight you, but he was dangerous too. Get too close and you would likely be burned. However indignant and hot-headed he may appear, his intemperateness could rapidly be diffused by humor or kindness. You never quite knew what he would do next. For his children, of course, Roald would always be a consummate father, flawed perhaps, like all parents, but always loyal and loving. He could never be replaced. To millions of children, he was simply their storyteller, his writing arm 6,000 miles long, reaching into classrooms and bedrooms, holding a pencil that would never quite fall from his hand.
Well done. The life and work of Roald Dahl. And I think we know what he would be doing now. Writing children's novels and maybe adult novels. We're book club. We're reading. What are we reading for book club, Abby?
Someone Like You.
Someone Like You for book club. Book club is for patrons. If you want to hang out with us, you can join us. The date of that I'm going to find right now on the website. Abby, really, really good job. That you went 5 hours.
Oh God.
And we're gonna go and we're gonna do more on the After Dark for patrons. Abby's gonna read the longest place name in the world. And then she's gonna talk all about the spy craft. We're gonna do Someone Like You on September 27th. There is a Gopher football game that day against Rutgers that I will be attending. So TBD. Abby, thank you so much. Please support the podcast if you appreciate what we're doing at all. It's, $5 a month, patreon.com/artofdarkpod, substack.com/@artofdarkpod. And we're going to give Abby a break before we come back on the After Dark. Abby, tremendous work. I learned so much, and it was very, very moving. One of the darkest, most intense episodes I think that we've done. Very shocking, and I just think you did a great job. So thank you very much, Abby. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll be back on the After Dark.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.